After the hospital called to tell me my wife had suffered a stroke, a stranger called, his voice cold as a knife, $180,000. Your wife said you'd pay the debt. The contract is overdue. I gripped the phone, growling, "Who are you?" He sneered. The man who understood your wife better than you did for 32 years. 4 days later at the funeral, my daughter clung to me, sobbing, "Dad, I'm here." But when a thick envelope arrived, her eyes fixed on it with a cold, calculating, and longing gaze. That's when I realized my family was a den of predators. Thank you for being here with me. Before we begin, drop a comment below and tell me, what are you doing while you listen, driving, working, or taking a moment for yourself? I read every comment, and your perspective matters. A quick note, some details in this story have been fictionalized to strengthen the message. What truly matters is the lesson it carries. The coffee was still warm when the hospital called to tell me my wife was dead. I sat in the living room of our Los Altos Hills home, watching the steam rise from the ceramic mug Josette had bought in Lisbon 3 summers ago. The clock read 8:47 p.m. She'd left for her West Hollywood atelier that morning, with a kiss on my cheek and a promise to be home by 7. At 55, I'd learned that venture capital taught you to read patterns, to see inflection points before they happened. But nothing prepared you for the voice on the other end of the line. "Mr. Upshaw, this is Dr. Morales from Los Angeles County Medical Center." His tone had that practiced compassion that comes from delivering bad news too many times. "I'm very sorry. Your wife suffered a massive stroke at 3:47 this afternoon. By the time she reached us, there was nothing we could do." 3:47, 5 hours ago. While I'd been reviewing quarterly reports and waiting for her headlights in the driveway, Josette had been dying in her studio, 52 years old and surrounded by fabric samples and design sketches instead of family. The mug felt suddenly heavy in my hand. I set it down carefully, watching coffee slosh against the rim. "I understand," I heard myself say, though I understood nothing. Dr. Morales was still talking something about arrangements, personal effects paperwork, when my phone buzzed with another incoming call. I barely registered, thanking him, before the line switched. "This is about the 180,000. The male voice was sharp, impatient, entitled. "Josette said you'd handle it. The contract's overdue." I stood up too quickly. The room tilted. "What contract? Who is this?" "The work's done. Your wife promised payment. I need it processed this week." My wife just died. The words felt unreal in my mouth. A pause. "I'm sorry for your loss, but business is business." She signed the agreement. The line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, trying to reconcile two impossible facts. Josette was gone, and apparently she'd authorized a 6-figure contract I knew nothing about. In 32 years of marriage, we'd never hidden financial decisions from each other. I'd cashed out of the fintech company I'd co-founded with Kingsley Spencer in 2019, giving us more money than we'd ever need. What contract could possibly be worth that much? 4 days between death and burial. 4 days of condolence calls, flower arrangements, and a question I couldn't answer: who was the man on the phone? Emmerich flew in from Seattle on Thursday, his face drawn with the kind of grief that comes from losing a parent too young. At 26, my son had built a career in AI ethics, teaching machines to make moral choices. Now he sat across from me in the kitchen, making choices about casket linings and flower types, because I couldn't seem to form coherent sentences. "Dad, the funeral home needs to know about the service," he said gently. "Saturday at 2, I nodded. Saturday, Palo Alto Memorial Chapel. It felt arbitrary, like every other decision that week. Margot called from Brooklyn that night, her voice breaking with theatrical precision. 28 years old, and she'd always known exactly how to perform emotion. "I'll be on the first flight tomorrow," she sobbed. "Oh God, Dad, I can't believe she's gone. We need to stay strong for each other." I wanted to believe the grief in her voice was real. Saturday arrived with California sunshine that felt like an insult. The chapel smelled of lilies and furniture polish. I stood at the entrance in a suit that suddenly fit wrong, shaking hands with people whose names evaporated the moment they spoke them. Colleagues from Josette's atelier. Neighbors. A surprising number of strangers. Margot swept in 20 minutes before the service designer black dress and oversized sunglasses, embracing me with a force that suggested witnesses more than comfort. "Dad." She pressed her face against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I'm here now. We'll get through this together." Over her head, I caught Emmerich's eye. He looked away. The service was a blur of eulogies from people who described a version of Josette I recognized, but couldn't quite touch. Visionary designer, generous mentor, devoted wife and mother. Each word felt like it was traveling through water before it reached me. Kingsley found me during the reception, his hand on my elbow, voice low. We'd known each other for 30 years, built a company from scratch, in a Palo Alto garage, trusted each other with everything that mattered. "Listen," he whispered, glancing around. "About that envelope, sometimes it's easier to just sign these things and move on." For closure, I stared at him. "What envelope?" He blinked. "The one they're bringing. Just trust me on this. Sign it and let it go." Before I could respond, 3 men in dark suits appeared at my side. I'd never seen them before. The tallest one extended a thick manila envelope, the words, "Urgent Contract Settlement," printed in red across the front. "Mr. Upshaw," he said quietly, "our condolences. This requires your immediate attention. How many people at my wife's funeral were strangers to me?" I took the envelope, feeling its weight. Legal documents by the thickness. The men nodded and disappeared back into the crowd as if they'd never been there. Emmerich materialized beside me. Who were they? I have no idea. The service was ending. People were filing past the casket for final goodbyes. I stood there holding the envelope, watching Margot dab at her eyes with a tissue, accepting embraces from mourners with perfect practiced grief. Then her gaze shifted, not to the casket where her mother lay, not to the portrait we'd chosen, Josette laughing in her studio with late afternoon light catching her hair. Margot was looking at the envelope in my hands. Her eyes tracked it with an intensity that had nothing to do with mourning. For just a moment, maybe 3 seconds, her grief-stricken mask slipped. What I saw underneath was cold, calculating, waiting. She caught me watching, and the mask snapped back into place. Fresh tears, trembling lip. "Dad, are you okay? Do you need to sit down?" But I'd already seen it. The way a venture capitalist sees the moment a pitch falls apart when the numbers don't match the story. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. Whatever was inside, Margot already knew about it. She wasn't grieving. She was monitoring. And my oldest friend had just told me to sign without reading. I thought I knew everything about my wife until I found a key to a place I'd never heard of. The envelope sat unopened on my desk. After the funeral, after Emmerich drove back to his hotel and the last mourners finally left, I'd carried it into Josette's home office and set it down beside her laptop. I told myself I'd read it in the morning when my head was clearer. But clarity wasn't coming, and sleep felt impossible. Instead, I found myself opening desk drawers I'd never had reason to search before. Josette had always handled her business independently. The atelier was her domain, built from nothing over 15 years into one of West Hollywood's most exclusive design houses. I'd been proud of her for that. Proud that she didn't need my money or my help, that she'd created something entirely her own. Now that pride felt like willful blindness. The top drawer held the ordinary debris of a working life: pens, business cards, loose receipts. The second drawer stuck slightly when I pulled it. Inside her appointment calendar lay beneath a stack of fabric swatches. I flipped it open to June. Her familiar handwriting filled the pages in neat blocks. Client consultations, vendor meetings, staff reviews, and there on every Tuesday and Thursday, going back weeks, Marcus. I turned to May. Marcus. Tuesday and Thursday. April, Marcus. My hands weren't steady as I pulled out January, then the previous year's calendar from the drawer below. Marcus. 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 Every Tuesday and Thursday, stretching back 12 years, as regular as a heartbeat. The man on the phone demanding payment, his voice had carried that particular kind of entitlement that comes from intimacy, from being owed something beyond money. "Who the hell is Marcus?" I said aloud to the empty room. The sound of my own voice startled me. It was 11:30 at night. I should go to bed. I should leave this alone until morning. I kept searching. At the back of the bottom drawer, wedged behind a box of archived tax documents, my fingers found a small key ring. 2 keys, one standard door key, one smaller, like a safety deposit box key. A white plastic tag attached to the ring read, VI-0947, West Hollywood. Vault or storage unit most likely. 0947 would be the unit number. Why would Josette need a vault I knew nothing about? I sat there holding the keys, feeling the weight of 32 years of marriage shift beneath me. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she'd kissed me goodbye and driven to the atelier. Or so she'd said. Los Altos Hills to West Hollywood was an hour and 20 minutes in light traffic. Had she been going to the atelier at all? How many Tuesdays had I kissed her goodbye, never knowing she was driving toward a man named Marcus? I called Emmerich at midnight. He answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Did your mother ever mention someone named Marcus?" A pause. "Marcus, who?" "I don't know, just Marcus." "No." He was waking up, now alert. "Why?" "Go back to sleep," I said. "I'll explain later." I hung up before he could argue. By 5:30 a.m., I was in the car heading south on 101. The envelope sat unopened on the passenger seat. Whatever legal trap it contained could wait. I needed to know who my wife had been when she wasn't with me. The vault facility sat in an industrial stretch of West Hollywood, wedged between an auto body shop and a catering supply warehouse. The building was concrete and anonymous, designed to be forgotten. A small brass plaque beside the entrance read, "Secure Vault, Private Storage." The lobby was empty except for a drowsy security guard behind bulletproof glass. He barely glanced at me as I signed the visitor log with a name I made up and walked through the security door when it buzzed open. Unit WV-0947 was on the second floor, 4th door on the left. My hand shook as I fitted the smaller key into the lock. The vault door opened with a soft click. 22 years of marriage ended with the same sound. Inside the space was roughly 3 feet by 3 feet, climate-controlled and pristine. No dust, no disorder. Everything carefully arranged on built-in shelves. A Patek Philippe watch in a velvet box, men's-style titanium and elegant. I lifted it out. The back was engraved M and S 1997, our wedding year, M for Marcus. S for Simone Josette's middle name. They had matching watches. A black leather folder labeled January Plan in gold embossing. I didn't open it. Not yet. I couldn't. A USB drive in a small plastic case unmarked. And at the back of the top shelf, a Polaroid photograph in a clear protective sleeve. I lifted it carefully, as if it might disintegrate. 3 people photographed outdoors in golden summer light. A park, maybe, or someone's backyard. Josette in the center, her head thrown back in laughter, the real kind, unguarded and joyful, the way she used to laugh with me, before something changed between us that I'd never quite identified. To her left, a man in his early 50s, rugged and weathered in the way of someone who worked with his hands. Contractor, my mind supplied automatically. His arm was around Josette's waist, casual and possessive. To her right, a girl of about 15, dark hair and delicate features. The girl was smiling at Josette with open adoration. Something about the girl's face made my chest tighten. The shape of her eyes, the angle of her jaw. I turned the Polaroid over. In Josette's handwriting, Marcus Josette and S. Summer, 2023, 6 months ago. While I'd been planning our retirement trip to Portugal, while we'd been having our quiet dinners and weekend walks and all the comfortable rituals of a long marriage, she'd been building this, another family, complete and separate from everything we'd built together. I looked at the girl again, really looked. She had Josette's eyes. The January plan folder seemed to pulse on the shelf. The USB drive held God knows what secrets. The watch with its engraved date, our wedding year, sat in my palm like evidence of a crime I hadn't known I was part of. I stood in that vault, holding a photograph of 3 people who looked like they belonged together, and understood that I'd been living with a stranger. The security system at my wife's business didn't recognize me as family. I'd driven straight from the vault to the atelier, the Polaroid burning in my jacket pocket, like evidence at a crime scene. The building was exactly as Josette had described it over the years, a converted warehouse in West Hollywood's design district. 3 stories of exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. She'd been so proud when she bought it in 2012, turning it from abandoned industrial space into an exclusive atelier that attracted clients from Beverly Hills and Bel Air. I'd never been inside, not once in 15 years. She'd always said it was her sanctuary, her creative space, somewhere she could be just herself instead of someone's wife. Now I understood why. The reception area was all white marble and minimalist furniture designed to intimidate. A young woman in designer black looked up from her desk as I entered. "I'm Aldrich Upshaw," I said. "Josette's husband. I need access to her office." Her expression shifted to practiced sympathy. "Of course, Mr. Upshaw. I'm so sorry for your loss. Let me just check the authorized entry list." She tapped at her computer, then frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Upshaw. You're not on the authorized list for after-hours access. Only Miss Upshaw and Mr. Irvine have building access outside business hours." The room tilted. "Mr. Irvine. Marcus Irvine. He's listed as co-owner. Co-owner. Not contractor, not a fair business partner with legal ownership of a building I'd never set foot in." "How long has he been listed as co-owner?" She checked her screen. "Since the building was purchased, 2012, 12 years. The entire life of this business built on a lie." Before I could respond, a door behind the reception desk opened, and a woman emerged from what looked like a large workroom. She was in her early 40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a seamstress's apron with pins still stuck to the fabric. Her eyes locked onto mine with an expression I recognized from my years in venture capital, someone who'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I've been waiting for you," she said quietly. "I knew you'd come once you started finding things." The receptionist looked startled. "Kay, this is Aldrich Upshaw." "I know." Kay Ashford, the atelier's head seamstress, had the steady hands and calm assessment of her former career as an ICU nurse. But her voice carried the weight of someone carrying a dangerous secret. "We need to talk." "Not here." She gestured toward the stairwell. "There's something on the 3rd floor you need to see." I followed her up 2 flights of industrial metal stairs, our footsteps echoing in the empty building. Most of the staff hadn't returned since Josette's death. The 2nd floor was all workrooms and design stations abandoned mid-project. Fabric draped over dress forms like ghosts. The 3rd floor was different. Kay used a master key to bypass the security panel. The door opened into what the building plans probably called an executive suite. But it looked nothing like an office. A king-size bed unmade, white sheets and expensive linens, the kind Josette always preferred. A leather armchair by the window overlooking the street. Built-in bookshelves filled with hardcover thrillers and biographies, none of which were Josette's taste. She read design theory and art history, not Tom Clancy. On the nightstand, a men's watch. Not as expensive as the Patek Philippe from the vault, but nice. A charging cable for an iPhone. Reading glasses I'd never seen before. Kay stood by the door watching me process it. She called it her executive suite, she said quietly. But he was here more than she was. Tuesday and Thursday nights every week. Sometimes weekends. Tuesday and Thursday nights. The nights I'd believed she was working late, finalizing designs, managing her dream. She was. Just not alone. I walked to the bathroom. Men's toiletries lined the counter, shaving cream cologne, a DOP kit with the initials M.I. embossed in gold. Marcus Irvine had his own space here, his own routine. Then I saw the closet. It was a walk-in, professionally organized with custom shelving and LED lighting. 43 suits hung in perfect order, arranged by season and color. Business casual, designer labels. Size 42L, dress shirts still in dry cleaning plastic. A rack of ties. Leather shoes on built-in shelves, recently polished. This wasn't an affair conducted in hotel rooms and stolen hours. This was a wardrobe. A life. A home. How long? My voice sounded hollow. Or since the beginning. The building permits were filed in both their names in 2012. She told the staff he was a business partner, that they were co-investors. Some of us knew better. Kay paused. I was here the day she died. That's why I've been waiting for you. I turned to face her. What happened? She glanced at the ceiling at the corners of the room as if checking for cameras. Not here. They might be listening. Who? Marcus came by yesterday. He was looking for something. Going through her files, her computer. He didn't know I was in the workroom. I heard him on the phone talking about January, about contracts, about making sure everything was locked down before anyone found out. The January plan from the vault. Whatever it was, Marcus knew about it. Kay pulled a business card from her apron pocket and pressed it into my hand. My personal number. Meet me somewhere else. Somewhere they can't monitor. She dropped her voice to barely a whisper. What I saw the day she died, it wasn't just a stroke. There was someone else here that afternoon, and the timeline they gave the police doesn't match what I witnessed. The timestamp on the Polaroid flashed through my mind. Summer 2023, 6 months ago. The girl with Josette's eyes. The January plan. The watch engraved with our wedding year. All of it pointing to something larger than an affair. Meet me at the coffee shop on Melrose, Kay said, already moving toward the door. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Don't tell anyone you're coming. And Mr. Upshaw. She paused at the threshold. Whatever you think you know about your wife, you're only seeing the surface. My daughter called to check on me the same day I discovered her mother's other life coincidence. Or had someone warned her I was asking questions? I'd spent the morning at the Melrose coffee shop, listening to Kay describe what she'd witnessed the afternoon Josette died. By the time I got home to Los Altos Hills, my hands were shaking, and Emmerich had already made coffee I couldn't taste. We sat in the kitchen, going through everything I'd found: the vault contents, the third-floor suite, Kay's timeline that didn't match the hospital's records. Then my phone rang. FaceTime, Margot. Emmerich caught my eye across the table and mouthed a question. Answer it. I nodded and accepted the call. Margot's face filled the screen, all concern and careful sympathy. She was in her Brooklyn apartment, the one Josette had helped her furnish 2 years ago. Behind her, I could see the abstract painting we'd bought her for her birthday. Dad, I heard you went to the atelier yesterday, she said, her voice soft. Kay texted me. She said you seemed upset. Are you okay? You shouldn't be going through Mom's things alone. It's too soon, Kay had texted her. Of course she had. I wondered how many other people were keeping Margot informed of my movements. I needed to understand some things, I said carefully. Your mother had business arrangements I didn't know about. What kind of arrangements? A co-owner, someone named Marcus Irvine. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Marcus, I don't know anyone by that name. Are you sure? He's been co-owner since 2012. The receptionist confirmed it. Margot shook her head slowly. That's so strange. Mom never mentioned any business partner. Maybe it was just a financial arrangement. You know how she was about keeping business and family separate. There's a third floor, I said, watching her face. Private suite. Someone's been living there. A suite. Well, if there was a third-floor situation, Mom would have kept it completely separate from the business floor. She gestured vaguely. The lounge furniture she picked was always about privacy. You know she hated when the staff could see everything. The room went quiet. Emmerich had been scrolling through his laptop, barely paying attention to the call. Now his fingers stopped moving. I never mentioned a third floor, I said slowly. Or a lounge. How did you know about the furniture, Margot? Her face froze. For just a second, the mask of sympathetic concern slipped, and I saw panic underneath. Then she recovered, laughing too brightly. You just said there was a private suite. I said suite, not lounge, not furniture. You described specific details. Dad, I'm just trying to help you process this. You're grieving and everything feels suspicious right now, but you've been there, I said. To the third floor, multiple times. She opened her mouth, closed it. I need to go. I have a client meeting. The screen went black. My daughter knew about the third floor. My daughter had been there. Emmerich closed his laptop with a deliberate click. She knows more than she's saying. How much more? I'll find out. He spent the rest of the evening on his computer, doing whatever it is AI ethics researchers do when they decide ethics can wait. I didn't ask. I sat in Josette's office holding the Polaroid and trying to remember when Margot had stopped being on my side. The next morning, Emmerich came downstairs at 9 with his laptop and an expression I'd learned to recognize from his childhood, the look he got when he'd solved a problem and wasn't sure I'd want to know the answer. What did you find? He turned the screen toward me. Instagram story from May 20th, 3 weeks before Mom died. Look at the background. The screenshot showed Margot's face in the foreground, the kind of casual selfie she posted constantly. The caption read, "Helping Mom with Paperwork Marathon." But in the background, out of focus but readable if you knew what to look for, was a desk, Josette's desk, the same one I'd seen in her atelier office. And on that desk, clearly visible, was her appointment calendar open to a page showing 2 words repeated down the column, Marcus Tuesday/Thursday. She was there, Emmerich said quietly. At the atelier, with access to Mom's office, her files, her calendar. She knew about Marcus. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I typed out a text to Margot. Need to talk about your May 20th Instagram story, the one from Mom's atelier. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then my phone rang. Dad, listen. Margot's voice was high and tight. That photo, it's not what you think. Tell me about Marcus. I don't. She stopped. I could hear rapid clicking in the background, the sound of someone typing frantically. You're grieving and you're seeing things that aren't there. That photo doesn't prove anything. Then why are you deleting it right now? Silence. I can hear you typing, Margot. What are you deleting? More clicks. Faster now. I'm not. Emmerich leaned over and tapped something on his laptop. His screen mirrored to my phone, and suddenly I was watching Margot's Instagram account in real time. As I watched, the May 20th story vanished. Then her cloud backup indicator flashed. Files being deleted. Stop, I said. You don't understand what you're seeing. Her voice cracked. I was just helping Mom with paperwork. That's all. The calendar was just sitting there. I didn't even look at it closely. Then why delete the evidence? It's not evidence. There's nothing to... She made a sound, halfway between a sob and a laugh. Dad, please. You're making this into something it's not. Mom had a business partner. So what? That doesn't mean... What else did she tell you? What else did you know that I didn't? The line went dead. Emmerich didn't say, your daughter. He said, she's lying to you. The distance in his voice was new. I sat there staring at my phone, watching the deleted story counter tick up on Emmerich's monitoring screen. She was erasing everything: Instagram, Facebook backup, iCloud, Google Photos. Systematic and thorough. Years of digital forensics training from the fintech world told me what she didn't know. Deleted files leave traces. Metadata persists. Screenshots live forever once they're taken. But the fact that she was deleting them at all meant she understood exactly what they proved. After watching Margot delete evidence, I'd spent the rest of June 11th wondering what else she was hiding. By morning, I knew where to look. If Josette had Marcus as a business partner, there would be corporate structures. Paper trails that couldn't be deleted with panicked clicking. Emmerich sat beside me at the kitchen table, his laptop open to the California Secretary of State's business entity search. I typed in Josette's name. 3 active limited liability companies appeared. Atelier Holdings West LLC. Filed March 2012. Registered Agent Hartley Harrington. SJI Property Management LLC. Filed August 2013. Registered Agent Hartley Harrington. January Trust Services LLC. Filed January 2015. Registered Agent Hartley Harrington. Dad. Emmerich's voice was quiet. Hartley's been our family attorney for 15 years. Hartley Harrington had drafted our wills, handled our estate planning, been a groomsman at our wedding. He'd held Margot as a baby and sent Christmas cards every year with photos of his own children. And he'd been the registered agent for my wife's secret corporate empire the entire time. Click on January Trust Services, I said. The LLC had been created in January 2015. Ownership listed as multiple members, actual names shielded behind the registered agent. The January plan wasn't just a folder in a vault. It was a legal entity waiting to activate. I need to call him, I said. Hartley answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that polished confidence built from decades of corporate law. Aldrich, I've been expecting your call. Those 5 words told me everything. You're the registered agent on 3 companies Josette created, I said. No greeting, no small talk. Companies I knew nothing about. Josette asked me to handle certain corporate matters. It's completely legal. Legal isn't the question. You've been our family attorney for 15 years. You sat in our living room and helped us write our wills. You knew I had no idea these companies existed. I have a duty to my clients, he said, more careful now. Josette was my client independently from you. Attorney-client privilege applies. She's dead, Hartley, which makes this even more delicate. There are legal structures that will need to be properly unwound. I'd be happy to walk you through. Why didn't you tell me? My voice cracked. We've been friends since grad school. You stood at my wedding. Why didn't you say anything? Silence. Then, because she asked me not to. And I'm very good at my job. The line went dead. I sat holding the phone, feeling the ground shift beneath 30 years of friendship. Hartley hadn't just failed to tell me, he'd actively built the infrastructure that allowed Josette to hide her other life. Every LLC filing, every corporate shield had his signature on it. Emmerich reached across and closed the laptop. We need help. Someone who isn't compromised. Everyone's compromised, I said. Kingsley told me to sign the contract at the funeral. Hartley helped Josette build shell companies. Margot knew about Marcus and lied to my face. You trust me. I looked at my son, 26 years old, teaching machines to make ethical choices while watching his family collapse around him. Yes, I trust you. Then let's go back to the atelier. Kay said there was more. We arrived at the West Hollywood building just after 7:30. The main floor was dark, but light came from the second-floor workroom. Kay sat at a cutting table surrounded by half-finished garments, waiting as though she'd known we were coming. She looked up, and I saw the same expression as before. Haunted, afraid, and determined. I made copies, she said, without preamble, pushing a sealed manila envelope across the table. My name was written across the front in black marker for Aldrich evidence. One for you, one in a safety deposit box. Because once you see this, people will want it destroyed. What is it? She's security footage from June 3rd. Josette had cameras installed on a separate system from the building's security. They capture everything. She folded her hands in her lap. Margot was here that day. She came around 3 in the afternoon. I heard them talking in Josette's office. Margot was in New York. No. Kay's voice was flat. She flew in that morning. At 3:47, I heard a crash. I ran in. Josette was on the floor, conscious but unable to speak. Classic stroke symptoms. I'm a former ICU nurse. I reached for my phone and Margot stopped me. Stopped you. She said her mother just needed a moment. That these spells passed. She told me to give them privacy. Kay's voice broke. I should have called anyway. But Margot was her daughter, and she seemed so certain, and I waited. How long? 12 minutes. Margot was on her phone the entire time, texting someone, watching for replies. At 3:58, she looked up and said, "Okay, you can call now." The envelope sat heavy in my hands. Inside was a USB drive containing 12 minutes of security footage. 12 minutes that might prove my daughter had stood by while her mother died, waiting for someone's permission before allowing help to arrive. Who was she texting? I asked. Kay looked at me steadily. That's what the footage will show you. 24 hours after I learned my daughter might have killed her mother, she texted to say she was coming home to help me grieve. I stared at the message on my phone. The USB drive from Kay sat in my desk drawer unwatched. I hadn't been able to bring myself to look at the footage yet. 12 minutes of watching Margot let her mother die while texting someone for permission. Now she was on a flight from JFK to SFO, arriving at noon. You're not going to tell her what you know, Emmerich said. It wasn't a question. We were in the kitchen, the envelope from Kay still sealed on the counter between us. I'd told him what Kay had witnessed. He'd gone very quiet, then asked if we were calling the police. Not yet, I said. I need to understand what we're dealing with first. If Margot delayed calling 911, she did it for a reason. Someone told her to wait. That's what I need to find out. And I can't do that if she knows we're investigating. Emmerich nodded slowly. So you're going to let her come here? Let her think you don't know. Exactly. Dad, that's dangerous. If she's involved in something, then I need to know how deep it goes before I make any moves. I picked up the envelope. This footage proves she was there, but it doesn't tell me why, or who she was working with. Margot arrived at 2 p.m. with 2 suitcases and the kind of theatrical grief I'd come to recognize as performance. She hugged me at the door, her face buried in my shoulder. Dad, I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. You shouldn't have to deal with all this alone. I patted her back mechanically. It's okay. You're here now. She pulled away, wiping at eyes that weren't quite wet enough. Have you been managing okay? All the paperwork and legal stuff, it must be overwhelming. I'm getting through it. Well, let me help. I can organize Mom's papers, deal with the estate documents. Where did you put those things from the funeral? The envelope those men brought, there it was. Less than 5 minutes in the door, and she was already angling for the contract envelope. In my office, I said carefully, but I haven't opened it yet. We should probably deal with that soon. Legal documents have deadlines. She moved toward the hallway like she was already planning to retrieve it. Margot. She stopped, turned back with perfect concern on her face. Yes. Hartley called yesterday. Our family attorney. He mentioned some LLCs your mother created. Did she ever talk to you about business structures? The change was subtle. A tightening around her eyes. A fractional pause before she answered. No. Mom kept business completely separate from family. Why would I know about that? Just wondered. It's been a lot of surprises. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure it has been. That's why I'm here to help you make sense of everything. She'd come home. The daughter who'd delayed calling 911 was sleeping in the room next to mine. I lay awake that night listening to the house settle, knowing Margot was 20 feet away. Emmerich had texted me at 11. Don't let her near your computer. I'm checking security logs tomorrow. At 6:30 the next morning, he knocked softly on my door. Dad, you need to see this. I followed him to his room. His laptop was open to what looked like a data table, columns of timestamps, IP addresses, file names. Family iCloud security logs. He said, his voice quiet but controlled. I pulled them last night. Look at this. He pointed to a cluster of entries dated May 27, 2024. The timestamp read 3:47 p.m. Someone accessed your iCloud account. Not from your phone or laptop, from an unknown device. They went through your financial documents, trust information, password vault. My mouth went dry. May 27th. That's a week before Mom died. 7 days. Emmerich pulled up another screen. IP address traces to the West Hollywood atelier. And look at the device fingerprint. He expanded the technical details. Device name Margot's MacBook Pro. Registered to her Brooklyn address. May 27th. Josette had kissed me goodbye that morning, said she was excited to work with Margot on the new collection. I'd thought it was mother-daughter bonding. What did she access? Emmerich scrolled through the file list. Everything. Bank account statements, property deeds, the 2019 trust documents showing the fintech exit, $50 million. The money I'd made when Kingsley and I sold the company. We'd structured it carefully, put it in trusts to minimize taxes and protect assets. Only Josette and Hartley knew the full amount. Now Margot knew too. Not she downloaded them, Emmerich continued. Exported the files. This wasn't casual browsing. Someone was building a complete financial profile of you before Mom's death. I stared at the screen. May 27th, 2024, 3:47 p.m. 7 days later, Josette would collapse at exactly the same time. 3:47 p.m. How many files? Emmerich pulled up the export log. 18 documents, trust agreements, bank statements, investment portfolios, tax returns going back 5 years. And this, he clicked on one entry. Your password vault export, which means she had access to everything. Every account, every login, every security question. She was at the atelier that day, I said slowly. I remember. Josette called me around 4, said Margot was helping her with design work. They were having such a nice afternoon together. She wasn't designing, She was stealing your financial identity. I looked at the timestamp again. 3:47 p.m., the same minute a week apart. Was it deliberate calling card or just coincidence? Can you tell if she shared these files with anyone? I'd need access to her devices. But Dad, Emmerich turned to face me fully. This was planned. 1 week before Mom died, Margot had your complete financial picture. Trust structure, asset locations, everything someone would need to know before executing an inheritance play. The cliffhanger from Kay's footage echoed in my head, Margot on her phone texting someone waiting for permission. She wasn't working alone, I said. No. Question is, who was she working with? Mom, Marcus, someone else. The file access log glowed on the screen. 18 documents. 50 million in trusts. A week of preparation before a stroke at exactly the same timestamp. We need a forensic accountant, I said. Someone who can trace where money's actually flowing through these LLCs. If Margot had my financial data, someone used it for something. I had spent 22 years building wealth in Silicon Valley. And now, 2 weeks after burying my wife, I was sitting in San Francisco, looking for someone who knew how stolen fortunes disappeared. Emmerich found him through a Stanford contact, Ignacio Wolf, 53, former SEC investigator, now working privately for clients who needed answers faster than the government could provide them. His office sat high in the financial district, with wide windows facing the Bay Bridge. Your son said this was urgent, Ignacio said, shaking my hand. Unauthorized LLC activity, possible embezzlement. My wife had a financial life I knew nothing about, I said, and I think my money funded it. He didn't react. Show me. I laid everything on his desk. The 3 LLC registrations, Hartley's name, as registered agent, the vault documents, and the Polaroid of Josette standing beside Marcus Irvine. Ignacio listened in silence, taking careful notes. When I finished, he said, I need access to every account. Business, personal, everything. 3 hours later, he called me back. His desk was covered in printouts and flowcharts. Your signature appears on multiple transfer authorizations, he said. But I'd bet my license they were forged. How much money? $3.2 million. Moved between 2015 and 2024. He pointed to the chart. My companies had paid consulting fees to Atelier Holdings West LLC. From there, 90% went to SJI Property Management LLC, then to Irvin Construction Services LLC, Marcus Irvine's company. The man in the Polaroid. The man from Josette's Tuesdays and Thursdays. She was paying him with my money, I said. Not just paying him, Ignacio replied. Look here, he pulled up another filing. January Trust Services LLC, effective January 2025. When it activates, he said slowly, control transfers to Margot, my daughter. For a moment, I couldn't speak. What does that mean? It means that on January 1st, 2025, if certain conditions are met, Margot gains legal authority over assets held by January Trust Services. And based on the money trail, those assets likely came from your accounts. Can we stop it? If we prove fraud. But we need intent. Conspiracy. Right now, it could be disguised as estate planning. He leaned forward. Find the original January plan documents. Those may be the key. The next morning, Hartley called. He said there was an urgent estate matter. Margot insisted on coming. We met in Hartley's downtown conference room, the same room where Josette and I had discussed retirement plans 5 years earlier. Same leather chairs, same city view. But Hartley's smile looked tighter now. Margot sat beside me in a black dress. Then I smelled it. Josette's perfume. The exact scent my wife had worn for 30 years. Thank you for coming. Hartley said, sliding a thick document toward me. This is a power of attorney for estate management. Standard procedure. It allows Margot as sole surviving child to manage her mother's business affairs while probate proceeds. 72 pages. Dense legal language. I'll review it first, I said. Hartley nodded, but his fingers tapped once on the table. Of course. Though there are tax deadlines and business obligations, the sooner we file, the smoother everything becomes. Margot leaned closer. Her voice softened. Just sign it, Dad. Don't you want this nightmare to end? I looked at her. My daughter was wearing her dead mother's perfume and whispering her dead mother's lies. So I read. Page 1 was harmless. Page 5 was routine. Page 12 listed estate assets. Then I reached page 47. Buried inside a paragraph about successor management authority was the real purpose my signature would give Margot immediate, irrevocable control over all LLCs connected to Josette's estate, including Atelier Holdings, West SJI Property Management, and January Trust Services. And worse, it included access to all trust assets established before 2020. My 2019 trust. $50 million. One signature, and Margot would control everything. I looked up. This gives her control of the LLCs. Hartley smiled. Standard language. And access to my 2019 trust. That trust has nothing to do with Josette's estate. Cross-administrative efficiency, he said. A formality. I stood. The document remained unsigned on the table. I'll have my own attorney review it, I said. Ignacio Wolf, former SEC investigator. He's very thorough with financial documents. Hartley's face drained of color. Margot's hand tightened around the chair. Dad, she said, you're being paranoid. Hartley has been our family attorney for 15 years. Yes, I said. I know exactly how long he's been helping your mother hide money from me. Then I walked out. In the elevator's polished doors, I saw Margot's reflection behind me. She wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was already texting someone. Digital evidence doesn't lie. But when Ignacio brought the LLC email archive to my house, I almost wished it did. After the failed power of attorney meeting, Margot had gone upstairs, claiming she had a migraine. I had seen her through the crack of her bedroom door phone pressed to her ear, whispering too quietly for me to hear. Whoever she had texted in Hartley's office had called her back almost immediately. Now Ignacio sat in my living room with his laptop open. Emmerich was beside him studying the forensic files. It was 4 o'clock on June 18th, and what they were about to show me made the forged signatures look like a small crime. Email archives, Ignacio said. Hartley's firm keeps backups. Old attorney files are archived, not deleted. Your family correspondence goes back 15 years. You got access to Hartley's server. I sent a legal discovery request tied to suspected fraud. His IT department complied this morning. I doubt they understood what they were handing over. He turned the laptop toward me. April 2023, he said. That's when Josette began placing Margot inside the corporate structure. Not after her death. 14 months before. The email subject read LLC Succession Planning. Sender Josette Upshaw. Recipients Hartley Harrington, Margot Upshaw. April 12, 2023. Josette had written that Margot needed signatory authority on Atelier Holdings before the end of the year. May 3rd, Hartley replied with board position documents. Margot would have voting authority over all 3 LLCs starting June 1st. Then came the email that made my stomach turn. June 15, 2023. Josette wrote to Margot, everything is progressing as planned. Once January procedures activate, you'll have complete control. Your father won't suspect until it's too late. Emmerich read over my shoulder. His face went still. Mom wrote that he asked, what transition is she talking about? I kept scrolling. July, August, September. A clean, organized record of my wife removing every barrier between Margot and my assets. Then October 22nd. Margot asked Josette to confirm she would have signature authority on the 2019 trust after activation. My 2019 trust, $50 million. The next day, Josette replied, "Hartley is handling that separately. The POA will be the final piece. Make sure you're convincing when the time comes." "The power of attorney," I said. "The one they wanted me to sign." Ignacio nodded. "Exactly." He opened the last email. December 28, 2023. Josette confirmed that January activation procedures were finalized. Corporate authority was ready. Asset transfer protocols were in place. Margot would gain full LLC control on January 1st, 2025. 5 months before Josette died, she had completed the plan to let our daughter take over everything I had built. The digital signatures match Margot's MacBook, Ignacio said. Registered to her Brooklyn address. She was not just included. She was active. Emmerich walked to the window, jaw tight. "I need copies," I said. Ignacio handed me a USB drive. "Already done." I also filed a preliminary fraud complaint with the DA. With these amounts and interstate activity, this will not stay quiet. After he left, the house felt too still. Margot was upstairs behind a closed door. Emmerich wanted to confront her. "Not yet," I said. "She helped Mom steal from you for over a year." "I know." "Then what else do you need?" I looked toward the staircase. "I need to know why." That night, Emmerich and I stayed in my office comparing Ignacio's financial data with the email archive. Around 11:30, Margot's voice slipped through the wall from the guest room next door. She was on the phone. Emmerich and I froze. "I did exactly what Mom said," Margot whispered. But her voice was different now. Cold. Controlled. The whisper worked in Hartley's office, but my stepfather still hasn't revealed where the money is. Should I push harder or wait for January to activate? "Stepfather." The word landed between us like a blade. Emmerich turned toward me. "What does she mean?" he whispered. Before I could answer, Margot continued. "Yes, I know Emmerich doesn't know. Neither of them do. That's why Mom kept it separate. The biology thing was her insurance policy." Emmerich's face changed in seconds from confusion to shock to something close to horror. Then Margot laughed, a real laugh. Not grief, not fear, not the broken daughter she had performed for us. "Don't worry," she said. "By January, the trust activates, I get authority, and legally there's nothing they can do." Mom set it up perfectly. A pause. Then she said the name. "Marcus, I have to go. I'll call tomorrow after I see what I can get from the office." "Marcus." She was talking to Marcus Irvine. The call ended. Footsteps crossed the room. The bathroom door closed. Emmerich stared at me. "How long have you known?" "I didn't," I said. "Not until after your mother died." The Polaroid in the vault. Marcus. Josette. The girl in the photo. "Margot," he said. I nodded. "She isn't yours," Emmerich whispered. "No." The word seemed to break something in him. He stepped back from me. "What else haven't you told me?" I thought of Kay's USB drive in my desk drawer, the footage showing Margot delaying the emergency call while Josette died. "Everything," I said. "I'll tell you everything. But we have to be smart." Emmerich gave a bitter laugh. "Dad, she already thinks she's won." He looked toward the wall. "We have to stop her before January. Kay insisted we meet outside the city somewhere without cameras." That's how frightened she was. Emmerich had listened to everything. The vault, the LLCs, the Polaroid K's warning about the 12 minutes, and gone quiet for a long time before saying, "We need her full testimony." Recorded. So at 9 a.m. on June 20th, I sat in an anonymous coffee shop in Bakersfield, 40 miles from Los Angeles, watching Kay Ashford wrap both hands around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. "I've thought about this every day since it happened," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "Wondering if I could have saved her." "Well, tell me exactly what you saw." She took a breath. June 3rd. I was working in the main workroom around 3:45 when I heard voices from Josette's office, her and Margot door closed. At 3:47, something heavy hit the floor. I checked my phone when I heard the crash. I remember the time exactly. I ran in. Josette was down conscious, but her face was drooping on the left side. Classic stroke symptoms. I'm a former ICU nurse. I knew we had minutes, not hours. Kay's hands tightened around the mug. I pulled out my phone to call 911. Margot grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave a bruise. Wait. Give her a minute. She just needs to breathe. She positioned herself between me and Josette, kept insisting it was stress that Josette fainted sometimes. The whole time she was texting someone, watching her screen, waiting for a reply. Who was she texting? I don't know. But at 3:58 her phone buzzed. She read the message twice. Then she stepped aside. Okay. You can call now. Like she'd received permission. Someone had told my daughter it was acceptable to let her mother die. I called at 3:59. Kay said, her voice fracturing. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. The ER doctor said if we'd called immediately, the clot-busting drugs might have worked. After 12 minutes, the damage was already done. The hidden cameras in Josette's crown molding had recorded everything, the timestamps, Margot's phone, the moment she finally stepped aside. 2 days after Kay handed me the USB drive, her apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen, but her laptop had been moved, her backup drives accessed. Someone needed to know exactly what she had. I drove back to Los Altos Hills with the testimony recorded on my phone, feeling the full weight of it settle into my chest, like something permanent. The next afternoon, a black Mercedes pulled into my driveway. I was on the front porch reviewing Ignacio's financial analysis when the man climbed out, mid-50s, fit, weathered face, unhurried. The man from the Polaroid, from the third-floor suite, from 12 years of Tuesday and Thursday appointments. He walked up my front steps like he owned them. Mr. Upshaw, I'm Nigel Irvine. He extended his hand. I didn't take it. I think it's time we talked directly about Margot's future. Marcus was a nickname, Nigel Marcus Irvine. The co-owner on the shell companies. The man who had lived in my wife's atelier and received millions of my money across 9 years. Now standing on my porch, calling the girl I'd raised for 22 years his daughter. Blood is blood, he said. Josette made very clear arrangements. I'm here to offer a settlement. You keep the house, take $5 million, sign over the LLC control and the January trust to Margot. Everyone walks away. And if I don't, then complications may arise around June 3rd. Grief confuses timelines. Witnesses remember things differently under stress. It would be unfortunate if questions surfaced about who delayed critical medical care that afternoon. A threat dressed in careful language. He was telling me Margot would rewrite the story, bury the timestamps, manufacture doubt, turn Kay's testimony into a question of unreliable memory versus another unreliable memory. Get off my property. He didn't move. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph Margot at maybe 6 years old, sitting on his shoulders at a beach, both of them laughing, the ocean wide and bright behind them. A father and daughter with a shared history that had existed long before I understood what I was looking at. You were the legitimate face, he said, pocketing the phone. The financing. Josette built something real with me, a family, a future, a plan that runs deeper than you know. January 1st, 2025, the trust activates. Margot gets everything one way or another. The only question is whether you're still around to contest it. Whether you're still around, not whether I'd fight. Whether I'd exist to fight. He turned and walked back down my steps with the same unhurried confidence he'd arrived with, a man who had moved through the world for 12 years without once being told no. At the bottom, he paused, not turning around. $5 million is generous, Mr. Upshaw. Think about it. I watched his Mercedes disappear down the street and stood there in the afternoon heat thinking about Josette, whispering. I prepared Margot for everything while the hospital machines counted down around her. Thinking about Rule 12 turning to ash in my fireplace. Nigel Irvine had just confirmed everything. He hadn't come to negotiate. He'd come to measure me to see whether I could be bought frightened or simply removed from the equation before January arrived. He had his answer. Now I needed to make sure Breyer had mine. By the time I saw Margot's Instagram post, it had already been shared 14,000 times. Nigel's threat had been clear. Take the settlement or face consequences. I'd spent the night after his visit reviewing evidence with Emmerich, preparing a legal strategy with Ignacio. We'd been focused on corporate fraud on the LLCs, on building a criminal case. We hadn't anticipated Margot would go nuclear on social media. Emmerich found it first. He came into the kitchen at 11 a.m. on June 22nd, with his phone, his face pale. Dad, you need to see this. The video was 3 minutes long. Margot sitting in her Brooklyn apartment with morning light streaming through the window behind her. No makeup, eyes red from crying. The grief-stricken daughter I'd seen at the funeral, but amplified for maximum sympathy. I don't usually do this, she began, her voice breaking. But I need people to understand what's happening. My mother, Josette Upshaw, died 3 weeks ago. She built an incredible business from nothing, an atelier in West Hollywood that dressed celebrities and CEOs. She worked herself to exhaustion, building something she could leave to me. A pause. A carefully timed wipe of her eyes. My stepfather, the man my mom married, is now blocking me from everything she wanted me to have. He's hiding assets, refusing to release her estate, treating me like I'm stealing something that's rightfully mine. I just want what my mom worked for. What she died building for me. Stepfather. She'd said it. Not father, not dad. Stepfather. Technically true. Legally devastating. The video ended with her looking directly at the camera. If anyone knows a good estate attorney who helps families fight financial abuse, please reach out. I can't afford this fight on my own. The view count was climbing in real time. 14,000 shares became 16,000 as I watched. The comment section was unanimous. Rich tech bros always do this to women who built something. He probably drove her mother to an early grave with stress. And someone start a GoFundMe for her legal fees. Emmerich scrolled through the responses. Dad, they're calling you a narcissist. A financial abuser. Someone started a petition demanding you release the estate to her. I sat down heavily. She's not even lying. Technically, I am her stepfather. Technically, I am blocking her access. The truth just happens to be much bigger. And we need to respond. Tell people what really happened. And say what? That my wife of 32 years had a secret family, that our daughter delayed calling 911 while her mother died, that there's a conspiracy to steal $50 million. I shook my head. No one would believe it. We'd sound paranoid, defensive. 14,000 shares, 47,000 likes by 6 p.m. The court of public opinion had convicted me before I'd said a word in my defense. By evening, local news had picked it up. Daughter of deceased West Hollywood designer claims stepfather blocking inheritance. They'd found old photos of Josette's atelier openings, images of celebrity clients. Built a narrative of hard-working immigrant mother Josette was French-Canadian technically versus wealthy tech executive hoarding money. None of them mentioned the LLCs, the forged signatures, the 12 minutes. Margot had weaponized partial truth into perfect manipulation. The next morning, Ignacio arrived at 8 a.m. with a manila envelope sealed with red evidence tape. DNA results, he said without preamble. From the private lab. Also pulled Margot's original birth records and Josette's medical history from 1995 to 1996. Emmerich and I sat at the kitchen table while Ignacio laid out the documents. First page, genetic analysis report. Client Aldrich Upshaw sample collected June 8, 2024. Subject Margot Upshaw sample from hairbrush collected June 9, 2024. Results, probability of paternity 0.00%. Biological father identified through database cross-reference Nigel Marcus Irvine 99.97% certainty. I'd known. I'd suspected since finding the Polaroid, but seeing it in black and white certified by a medical laboratory made it real in a way that photographs and calendars hadn't. There's more, Ignacio said quietly. Josette's medical records. I pulled them through a legal discovery request related to the estate. He slid another document across the table. Los Angeles County Medical Center Obstetrics Department. Patient Josette Simone Beaumont. Date of first prenatal visit, February 14, 1996. February 1996. 2 months before our wedding. Well, we got married in April, I said. My voice sounded distant. Margot was born in November. Josette told me she was premature. 7 months, she said. We'd been trying for a baby and she was so happy when it finally happened. Emmerich was reading over my shoulder, his breathing shallow. Dad, that means my whole life Mom and Margot were lying. Every birthday, every Father's Day, every time Margot called you Dad. November 1996. I'd held Margot in the hospital, counted her fingers, called her my miracle. Josette had been 7 months pregnant on our wedding day. In birth certificate lists you as father, Ignacio said. But the hospital records show the birth in L.A. County, not Palo Alto, where you told me you remembered. I'm guessing Josette drove to L.A. for the delivery. You weren't in the room. She said there were complications, that they'd taken her for an emergency procedure. By the time they let me in, Margot was already cleaned up, wrapped perfect. I closed my eyes. I never questioned it. Why would I? Because your wife was already pregnant with another man's child when she married you, Emmerich said. His voice was flat, emotionless in the way that meant he was barely holding together. She married you knowing you weren't the father. She lied about the due date. She made you think. Ignacio cleared his throat. There's one more document. I almost didn't include it, but you need to see the full picture. He pulled out a medical report dated March 1995. Palo Alto Fertility Clinic. Patient Aldrich Upshaw. Test results, semen analysis, showing severe oligospermia motility below 5% concentration, well below normal range. Diagnosis: less than 1% chance of natural conception without medical intervention. 1995. A year before I married Josette. A year before she was already pregnant. She knew, I said. Josette knew before we got married that I couldn't father children. Ignacio nodded. The clinic records show she requested a copy of your results in April 1995. Said she was your fiancé, wanted to understand treatment options. She'd chosen me, not despite my infertility, because of it. Because I couldn't give her what Nigel already had. Because a sterile husband made the perfect cover for another man's child. I'd spent 3 weeks learning what they'd stolen. Now it was time to build walls they couldn't breach. The fertility test from 1995 sat on my desk, like evidence of a crime I hadn't known I'd been victim to. Josette had chosen me specifically because I couldn't give her children. She'd married me knowing Nigel's child was already growing inside her. 32 years built on a lie from day one. But grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not with Margot's viral campaign turning public opinion against me. Not with Nigel making threats. Not with January activation 6 months away. Emmerich and I drove to San Francisco at dawn on June 24th. Ignacio had assembled a litigation team overnight, a trust attorney who'd defended billionaires through divorce wars, a forensic specialist who'd traced money through Panama Papers-level complexity, and a former federal prosecutor who'd sent white-collar criminals to prison for less than what Josette and Hartley had done. The conference room overlooked the financial district floor-to-ceiling windows, framing the morning fog rolling through the skyscrapers. The legal team had already reviewed everything: Ignacio's financial analysis, the forged signatures, Kay's testimony, the DNA results, the email archive showing Josette's systematic installation of Margot into the corporate structure. Mr. Upshaw. The trust attorney began, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that cost more than most people's cars. By activating the irrevocable protections on the 2019 trust, you're declaring war. They'll know the 50 million exists, and they'll escalate. They've already escalated, I said. Margot went public. Nigel made threats, and they're counting on me staying quiet until January. I'm done being quiet. The former prosecutor, a man who looked like he'd spent his career in courtrooms and emerged victorious, leaned forward. We file 3 motions simultaneously. 1 emergency freeze on all LLC assets pending fraud investigation. 2 petition for forensic audit of all transfers from your accounts to the LLCs since 2015. 3 revocation of Hartley Harrington's power of attorney and formal ethics complaint with the state bar. How long until they're frozen? Emmerich asked. Ignacio pulled up a document on his laptop. The LLC freeze can be executed today with the right judge. We've got one who specializes in financial fraud. She's seen the preliminary evidence. If we file by 10 a.m., freeze by close of business. Do it, I said. The paperwork took 7 hours. Legal language affidavits, exhibits showing the money trail. At 4:30 p.m., the trust attorney came back from the courthouse with a judge's signature on the emergency freeze order. At 4:47 p.m., the freeze went through. By 5 o'clock, Hartley's phone was ringing off the hook. By 5:15, Margot knew she'd lost access to Mom's money. Ignacio showed me the notification log. January trust services can't activate while under investigation. You just bought yourself 7 months. And with the irrevocable trust protections on the 2019 assets, they can't touch the 50 million even if they somehow break through on the estate side. I looked out at San Francisco Bay, watching the evening light turn the water gold. For 3 weeks, I'd been defensive-reactive, trying to understand what was happening while they executed a plan years in the making. Now I'd finally built a wall they couldn't breach, at least not legally. We drove home in silence. Emmerich kept checking his phone, monitoring social media for Margot's response. It came at 7 p.m., another tearful video claiming her stepfather had frozen Mom's accounts, and she couldn't even pay the atelier staff. The comments section exploded with outrage on her behalf. Let them rage, I thought. Public opinion couldn't override a judge's order. I was in my home office at 11:47 p.m. when the email arrived. Anonymous sender, Proton Mail account labeled S.Truth 2024. Subject line, I'm sorry. I almost deleted it. Another angry internet stranger probably responding to Margot's campaign. But something made me open it. So, Mr. Upshaw, please don't believe what they say about you. I know what happened on June 3rd. I know about the 12 minutes. My father thinks I don't understand, but I heard everything. I'm 15, and I don't want to be part of this anymore. They're using me to make you look cruel if you fight back. But what they did to your wife on June 3rd wasn't an accident. I heard my father on the phone at 3:58. My hands went still on the keyboard. 3:58 p.m. The exact moment Margot had gotten the text. The moment she'd stepped aside and let Kay call 911. The email continued. I don't have proof you'd believe, but I wanted you to know someone sees the truth. I'm sorry for what my father and your daughter are doing. They talk like you're the enemy, but I looked you up. You built companies that helped people. You were married to Josette for 32 years. That's longer than I've been alive. I don't think you're the villain they say you are." She signed it S, like the Polaroid, like Josette's handwriting from that summer photo. A 15-year-old girl asking a stranger for help because her own father had made her a weapon. Sage had to be. The girl in the Polaroid with Josette's eyes. Nigel's daughter. The one they'd probably told I was the monster trying to steal her sister's inheritance. I ran the email through a basic trace. Sent from a public library in Los Angeles. Generic computer, no personal identifiers. Whoever S was, she was smart enough to hide her tracks. But she'd mentioned 3:58 p.m. That wasn't public knowledge. That was security footage, timeline information only someone close to the conspiracy would know. She'd heard her father on the phone at 3:58. I read the email 3 times, feeling the implications settle over me like cold water. Nigel wasn't just complicit in the 12-minute delay. He was the one giving the orders. While Margot stood in that atelier office blocking Kay from the phone, she'd been texting her biological father, waiting for him to tell her it was time. And his 15-year-old daughter had overheard. I looked at the timestamp again. 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night, a school night. This girl, Sage, had snuck out to a public library after hours or waited until it was late enough her father wouldn't notice she'd used a computer just to warn a man she'd never met that he was fighting people who'd let someone die. She was 15, trapped in Nigel's house, probably being told I was the villain watching her father and half-sister execute a conspiracy that had started before she was born. And she was reaching out. The question wasn't whether to fight back anymore. It was whether I could protect an innocent child while destroying her father. The process server arrived at 7:18 a.m., which told me everything about how desperate they'd become. I was still wrestling with what to do about Sage, whether to protect a 15-year-old girl or use her information to destroy her father, when the doorbell rang on June 28th. Through the window, I saw a woman in business casual holding a manila envelope. "Emergency petition for estate control," she said when I opened the door. "Hearing is Tuesday, July 2nd, San Francisco Superior Court." 37 pages. I read it standing on my porch while the morning fog rolled through Los Altos Hills. Petitioners Margot Upshaw and Nigel Marcus Irvine. Relief sought emergency recognition as estate representatives under Josette's clearly documented succession wishes. Grounds Aldrich Upshaw is a non-biological stepfather with no legal standing to control the estate. Margot was properly installed as LLC successor by the decedent in 2023. The January trust demonstrates clear intent to transfer control to biological daughter. They were forcing the DNA question into public record, making my infertility, my decades of unwitting fraud, part of a legal filing anyone could access. I kept reading. The petition cited Hartley Harrington, my own family attorney, the man who had come to Christmas dinner, who had held Emmerich as a baby, now arguing in a legal document that I had no right to contest what Josette had built. It demanded full asset disclosure. Every account, every trust, every dollar I'd accumulated across 40 years. They wanted a court to reveal the full scope of what they were trying to steal. Emmerich came downstairs and found me at the kitchen table, the petition spread across the surface like a crime scene. "They're forcing the paternity question into public record," I said. "Making it official, I'm not her father. Not biologically, not legally, not in any way that matters to a court deciding who gets $50 million. He read in silence, jaw tightening with each page. When he finished, "What do we do?" "Amude seance. We file the counter-motion we've been preparing. Everything Ignacio has on the fraud, the forged signatures, the money trail to Nigel's company. And we attach Kay's affidavit about June 3rd. That puts her name in the public record." "I know. Dad, if they know she's willing to testify, Then we move fast enough that they can't do anything about it before the hearing. We met with the litigation team at 10 a.m. on June 29th. 8 hours to build a counter-motion that would either win the war or get someone killed. Ignacio had printouts covering every surface of the conference room, financial forensics email archives, DNA results, Kay's testimony. "We request 3 things," he said, reading from the draft filing. 1 independent forensic audit of all 3 LLCs for fraud and embezzlement, citing unauthorized transfers to Irvine Construction Services. 2 emergency freeze of all LLC accounts pending investigation. 3 court-appointed oversight of estate administration pending resolution of questions regarding the deceased's death. That last phrase was careful. Not murder, just questions regarding the deceased's death. "We attach Kay Ashford's sworn affidavit," he continued. "Former ICU nurse witnessed a 12-minute delay in calling 911 on June 3rd. Describes Margot physically preventing the emergency call while Josette experienced stroke symptoms. States facts, only no speculation on motive." "That makes Kay a target," I said. "It also makes her legally protected. Once her testimony is part of the court record, witness intimidation becomes a felony. We file at 10 a.m. Courthouse security gets a copy, and Kay gets police notification that she's a material witness in an active investigation." The trust attorney leaned forward. "Mr. Upshaw, once we file this, there's no going back. Even if you prove the fraud, even if you win everything, this accusation follows both of you forever." "She did delay medical care," Emmerich said quietly. "The security footage proves it. Kay's testimony proves it." We filed at 10. By noon, the motion was in the system. By 5 p.m., Judge Cardenas had granted the emergency freeze. Every LLC account locked. January Trust Services activation blocked pending fraud investigation. Court-appointed auditor assigned to review all transfers since 2015. Ignacio called me at 6. "We won the freeze. Margot can't access $1. The January trust is dead weight as long as the investigation runs." And Kay, a pause. "Her affidavit is public record now. Name, workplace, full testimony about the 12 minutes. Searchable on the court docket by anyone who knows how to look." I pulled up the filing on my laptop. There it was, Kay Ashford, head seamstress, Josette Upshaw, Atelier, West Hollywood. We had frozen $50 million and exposed the only witness who could prove what Margot and Nigel had done. They had 4 days before the July 2nd hearing to silence her. I saw Sage Irvin in person for the first time on the courthouse steps, and the look in her eyes told me she'd been forced to come. Kay's name had been in court records for 3 days. I'd arranged protection, moved her to a safe house, prepared her for intimidation attempts. What I hadn't prepared for was Nigel using his own daughter as a weapon. Emmerich and I arrived at San Francisco Superior Court at 8:15 a.m. Media had gathered on the steps, turning this into spectacle: wealthy executive versus grieving daughter, $50 million in disputed inheritance. Then I saw them. Nigel Irvine in an expensive suit, one hand on a teenage girl's shoulder. 15 years old, dark hair, delicate features. The face from the Polaroid, but thinner now. Frightened. Sage, the girl who'd sent the email warning me about her father's role in the 3:58 p.m. call. Now standing while cameras flashed, being used as exactly the pawn she'd begged not to be. A reporter thrust a microphone toward Nigel. "Mr. Irvine, can you comment on the allegations? This 15-year-old child is losing her inheritance because a man who isn't even biologically related wants to hoard $50 million. Josette Upshaw was her godmother, her mentor, the only mother figure she'd known. And now she's watching a stranger steal what Josette wanted her to have." Emmerich stiffened beside me. We knew it was a lie. Sage wasn't in Josette's documents, wasn't a beneficiary, but cameras didn't know that. They saw a scared teenager and a protective father. How is Sage related to the deceased? Another reporter asked. Josette was her godmother and mentor. They were family in every way that mattered. She spent summers at the atelier learning design. Now her stepfather is blocking access to what Josette explicitly wanted her to have. Perfectly crafted lies impossible to disprove in 30 seconds. Sage stood silent. When a reporter questioned her, she recited, "I just want what Ms. Upshaw wanted me to have." But her eyes flicked to mine for 1 second. The same eyes that had typed, "I don't want to be part of this anymore." Now she was the centerpiece of her father's strategy. Inside, Nigel kept Sage close. Margot embraced her god-sister for cameras. The three presented a united front family versus greedy outsider. The morning session was procedural. Judge Cardenas reviewed petitions, set ground rules, established discovery timeline. Sage sat in the gallery behind Nigel and Margot, silent and still. At 10:45, the judge called recess. Ignacio pulled me into an attorney conference room. Emmerich followed. "We need to talk about the email," Ignacio said. Sage's email proves Nigel gave orders at 3:58 p.m. It's direct evidence of his involvement. Combined with Kay's testimony, we establish conspiracy. "No, I said." Emmerich looked at me. "Dad, we have her email. She chose to send it. She's 15 and terrified. Using it would paint a target on her back bigger than the one on Kay. I won't do that to a child." "Aldrich, this weakens our position," Ignacio said. "Without her testimony about the 3:58 call, we rely only on Kay's timeline, not phone records proving Nigel gave orders." Emmerich was right about tactics. Using her email would win this battle. But it would prove Nigel and Josette right about me, that I'd sacrifice anything, even a child, for money. "So then we rely on what we have," I said. Kay's testimony, the USB footage, the financial forensics. We have enough without dragging a 15-year-old into testimony against her father. "She sent you the email," Emmerich pressed. "She chose to help. She chose to warn me. There's a difference. She said she didn't want to be part of this, and I'm not going to make her part of it." Remove any reference to S.Truth 2024 from our filings. Delete the email trail. As far as this court is concerned, Sage Irvine is an innocent bystander. Ignacio studied me. "You're giving up significant leverage, and I'm giving up the chance to destroy a child's relationship with her father, to prove a point I can prove other ways. There's a difference between justice and vengeance. I need to remember which one I'm fighting for." Recess ended. We filed back in. Sage sat behind Nigel and Margot, hands folded, eyes down. Small. Breakable. Exactly what Nigel wanted cameras to see. But when Judge Cardenas called the second recess, something changed. Nigel and Margot stood heading toward the exit. Sage stood too, but turned toward the restroom hallway. Then she stopped, looked directly at me, and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." She'd known. The whole time I'd been deciding whether to use her email, she'd been sitting 20 feet away, knowing I had evidence that could destroy her father. And she'd watched me choose not to use it. She disappeared before Nigel noticed. Emmerich leaned close. "She knows you protected her, which means she knows I have her email, and she's grateful I didn't weaponize it." "That's not gratitude, Dad. That's an ally. She just told you she's on your side." "Maybe. But she was a 15-year-old living under her father's roof, being used as a prop in a war over millions. Even if she wanted to help, even if she had evidence beyond the 3:58 p.m. call extracting her from Nigel's control without destroying her, would require something I hadn't figured out yet." Judge Cardenas called us back. The real battle was about to begin. The July 2nd hearing bought us time, but not victory. Judge Cardenas gave both sides 30 days to present definitive evidence. That meant Kay's USB could no longer stay hidden. Sage's silent gratitude had told me she was trapped, not guilty. But sympathy for a 15-year-old would not prove Margot had delayed calling 911 while Josette died. Only the security footage could. And if we were going to use it in court, it had to be untouchable. On July 5th, I hired one of the best certified forensic digital analysts in California. Her office sat in San Francisco's financial district, surrounded by glass walls, locked doors, and high-security servers. Chain of custody is everything she said, taking the USB from Kay with gloved hands. If the defense can suggest tampering, the footage becomes useless. We document who had it when it was created, how it was stored, and whether anything was modified. Kay gave a sworn affidavit. On June 3, 2024, at approximately 4:12 p.m., 15 minutes after the ambulance left with Josette, she accessed the atelier's security system. She copied footage from camera JU-03 Josette's office covering 3:45 to 4 p.m. Then she saved it to the USB and placed it in a Wells Fargo safety deposit box on Sunset Boulevard. A receptionist had driven her there and witnessed it. The analyst worked for 6 hours. Forensic imaging, metadata extraction, hash verification. When she finished, she handed me a report. The file was created June 3rd at 4:12 p.m., she said. Same day as the event. No modification since. This will hold up in court. Kay exhaled shakily. The original is still on the atelier's server, password protected under my access. I never deleted it. Emmerich, silent until then, finally spoke. Dad, once we show this, Margot will know we have proof. She already suspects, I said. That's why Nigel brought Sage to court. That's why Margot is playing victim online. They're building sympathy before the evidence hits. The chain of custody was sealed. The metadata was certified. The footage was bulletproof. Now we had to watch it. On July 8th, we gathered in my home office, Emmerich, Ignacio, Kay, and me. The USB lay in a forensic evidence bag on my desk. Ignacio connected it to my monitor. The timestamp appeared in the corner. Before he pressed play, Kay whispered, I've seen this 100 times. It doesn't get easier. Ignacio started the footage. 3:45 p.m. Josette's office was empty. Afternoon light came through the windows. 3:47:14. Josette entered with fabric samples. She placed them on her desk and reached for her phone. 3:47:31. She stopped. Her hand went to her head. She staggered, reached for the desk, missed, and collapsed. The timestamp kept moving. 3:48:02. Margot entered. She looked down at Josette, knelt, checked her pulse, then pulled out her phone. 3:48:47. Kay rushed in. Margot stood and blocked her. There was no audio, but the body language was clear. Kay tried to move toward Josette. Margot caught her wrist. Gentle but firm. 3:49:15. Kay pulled away and tried to step around her. Margot blocked her again. Then for 9 minutes we watched my daughter text. Long messages, rapid typing, pauses while she waited for replies. On the floor, Josette moved twice. Kay pointed at Josette, then at the phone, clearly begging Margot to call. Margot kept texting. 3:58:23. Her phone lit up. She read the message, then read it again. Then she nodded. 3:58:41. She finally stepped aside and gestured to Kay. Make the call. 3:59:02. Kay dialed. Margot stood there watching calm, almost satisfied. 4 p.m. The footage ended. Nobody spoke. Kay's voice broke first. That's it. 3:58. That's when she got the text. That's when she finally let me call. 12 minutes while Josette was dying. Emmerich stood too fast. Pause it. Zoom in. Can we see who she's texting? Ignacio rewound and zoomed. Wrong angle, he said. But phone records can prove it. We subpoena her texts from 3:47 to 3:59. I stared at Margot's frozen face on the screen. 28 years old. The girl I had raised. The girl I had taught to ride a bike. Sent to college. Protected. She isn't panicking, I said. She's waiting. Following instructions, Emmerich left the room. A moment later, I heard him in the bathroom. We watched it again. Then again, every detail became worse. Margot checking Josette's pulse but not calling for help. Kay visibly panicking, the timestamp proving each second she stole. On the fourth viewing, Ignacio suddenly stopped. Wait, go back to 3:51. He played it at quarter speed. 3:51:18. Margot looked up. Not at Kay, not at Josette, directly at the security camera, and she smiled. Not nervously, not accidentally. She smiled like she knew. Kay stared at the screen. She knew the camera was there. Ignacio's face hardened. She knew. I leaned closer. That smile changed everything. She wanted us to find this, I said. Emmerich returned pale. Why would she leave evidence? Maybe because it's not clean murder, Ignacio said. Delayed emergency response can be explained away, shock, trauma, confusion. Then why smile? Nobody answered. We sat there looking at Margot's frozen smile, trying to understand what kind of person deliberately left proof of her own crime. Either she was arrogant enough to believe no jury would convict her, or she had a counter-move we still hadn't seen. Margot's smile haunted me until Emmerich found the second camera file, the one showing what she did after the ambulance left. We'd watched the main footage 4 times trying to understand why someone would deliberately perform their own crime for a security camera. Emmerich had gone back to examining the USB's full contents, while I'd paced my office, unable to sleep. At 11:47 p.m. on July 9th, he called me back to the computer. Dad, there are 5 camera files total on this USB. We've only watched one, the main workspace angle camera, JU03. But look, he pulled up the directory. Hallway camera, JU07. Entrance camera, JU09. Kay copied everything from the security system that day. Show me the hallway. He opened the file. Timestamp started at 4:47 p.m., exactly 1 hour after Josette's collapse. The ambulance had already left, taking Josette to the hospital where she'd die 2 hours later. 4:47:23 p.m. Margot enters frame from the stairwell, alone. She walks down the hallway toward Josette's office, glancing back once to confirm she's unobserved. 4:48:11 p.m. She enters the office. We can't see inside, just the doorway. 5:23:34 p.m. She emerges carrying something wrapped in her jacket. Small, rectangular shapes. Stop, I said. Zoom in on what she's carrying. Emmerich enhanced the image. Through the fabric, hard edges screen corners. Electronics. Kay, who'd stayed late to watch the additional footage with us, leaned forward. Josette's phone and tablet. She took them. I wondered why we never found those when police asked for her devices during the initial incident report. Play the entrance camera, I said. Emmerich switched files. Exterior view of the atelier's back entrance, the service area where deliveries arrived. Timestamp 5:24 p.m. 5:24:17 p.m. Margot exits the building still carrying the wrapped bundle. 5:26:44 p.m. She walks to the dumpster against the back wall, industrial size, scheduled for twice-weekly pickup. 5:28:03 p.m. She lifts the dumpster lid, drops the bundle inside. We can hear the impact, even without audio, the way heavy objects land on metal. 5:28:51 p.m. She wipes her hands on her jeans, checks her own phone, a different device, her personal cell, and walks back inside. She destroyed the only evidence that could identify who sent the 3:58 text, I said. The phone company keeps metadata, time, sender number, but not message content. Without the actual device, we can't prove what the text said or who sent it. 23 minutes after calling 911, my daughter was destroying evidence in a dumpster while her mother fought for life in an ambulance. Can we recover them? Emmerich asked. Send someone to check the dumpster. June 3rd was over a month ago, Kay said quietly. Trash pickup is Tuesdays and Fridays. Those devices are in a landfill somewhere. We sat in silence, watching the timestamp count forward on the frozen screen. There's more, Emmerich said. He pulled up the final camera file. Security panel in the atelier's utility room. 5:42:16 p.m. Margot enters frame. She stands in front of the digital security monitor, the one showing all active cameras and their recording status. 5:42:33 p.m. She scrolls through the interface, checking each camera feed. 5:43:07 p.m. She selects the recording archive, confirms files have been saved to the server. 5:43:29 p.m. She nods to herself. Satisfied, leaves. She wanted this recorded, I said. All of it. The delay, the device disposal, the evidence destruction. She verified it was saved. The next morning, I met Ignacio and Emmerich at the law office in San Francisco. We needed to prepare the court presentation, but the question of Margot's intentional self-documentation hung over everything. Ignacio had been analyzing the motion sensor data from the security cameras overnight. These are commercial-grade sensors, he explained, pulling up technical specs. They activate when motion crosses the detection field. Look at this timeline. He showed us the activation log from camera JU03, the main workspace camera. Josette enters at 3:47:14. Camera activates at 3:47:11, 3 seconds before she enters frame. That's normal. Motion sensor picks up movement in the doorway, starts recording. And when Margot enters, 3:48:02 camera was already active from Josette's fall. But look at 3:51 p.m., the smile moment. He pulled up the footage, advanced frame by frame. She's standing still, blocking Kay. Then at 3:51:14, she shifts her weight, leans slightly right. At 3:51:16, she looks directly at the camera. At 3:51:18, she smiles. I don't understand, Emmerich said. The motion sensor field doesn't extend to where she was standing. She was in a dead zone the camera was recording because it had already activated, but her position wouldn't have triggered it if it had been dormant. She deliberately moved to trigger it, looked directly at the camera, and smiled. She knew exactly where the cameras were. She was performing for them. We'd found the smoking gun. But Margot had loaded it, aimed it at herself, and pulled the trigger with a smile. That's not guilt, that's strategy. She's going to claim she was following someone else's orders, Emmerich said suddenly. Diminished capacity, coercion. She'll throw Nigel under the bus and say she was manipulated, that she was a victim herself. Ignacio nodded slowly. The footage shows her committing the acts, but not why. If she can convince a jury she was under duress acting on Nigel's instructions because she feared him or believed she had no choice, then the evidence we thought would destroy her becomes proof she's telling the truth about being controlled. I finished. She documented everything because she knew she'd need to prove she was just following orders. There's one more thing, Ignacio said. He pulled up his laptop, navigated to an archived social media page. Margot's Instagram, June 3rd, 7:47 p.m., 3 hours after the stroke while Josette was still in surgery. The post showed a sunset photo, artistic and melancholy. The caption read, "Sometimes the hardest thing is watching someone you love make choices you can't stop. All we can do is survive what they leave behind." Carefully worded, publicly time-stamped, building her helpless victim narrative before we'd even started investigating. She's been constructing her defense since the moment Josette collapsed, I said. Every camera angle, every time-stamped social post, every piece of evidence we think incriminates her She's been building a counter-narrative all along, which meant she'd known this day was coming from the beginning. The courtroom screen froze on minute 7. Margot, standing in Josette's atelier office, phone in hand, camera timestamp, reading 3:54 p.m. In the adjacent timeline graphic, Josette lay on the floor, stroke ravaging her brain. I watched the gallery lean forward as Ignacio advanced the presentation to minute 8, then 9. Margot didn't move. The timestamp climbed to 3:57 p.m. before she finally stepped aside. Knowing Margot had built her defense from the beginning hadn't prepared me for watching it play out in court. She documented her own crimes because she had a counter-narrative ready. Now I was about to see what that narrative was. Judge Ramona Cardenas presided over courtroom 4B with the precision of someone who'd seen every manipulation attempt imaginable. At 58, she'd built a reputation in San Francisco probate courts for cutting through family estate wars with surgical efficiency. She'd granted our motion to present the USB evidence over Xavier Kelso's vigorous objections, and now the footage played on screens visible to everyone. Ignacio, serving as our forensic presenter, walked the court through the authentication. Your Honor, this evidence was certified by Finola Pemberton, a licensed digital forensic analyst. The metadata proves the footage was captured June 3, 2024, and has not been altered since creation. Chain of custody is documented in Exhibit 12A. Judge Cardenas reviewed the paperwork. The evidence is admitted. Proceed. The synchronized timeline filled the screen. Left side security camera footage. Right side timestamp log with key events marked. 3:47:31 p.m. Josette Upshaw collapses 3:48:02 p.m. Margot Upshaw enters office 3:49:15 p.m. Kay Ashford attempts to call 911, prevented by Margot 3:58:23 p.m. Margot receives incoming text message 3:58:41 p.m. Margot permits 911 call 3:59:02 p.m. Kay Ashford dials 911. Total delay 11 minutes 31 seconds. The gallery was silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing to watch. The footage shows Ms. Upshaw physically blocking Ms. Ashford from making an emergency call. Ignacio continued. For 11.5 minutes, while Josette Upshaw experienced stroke symptoms visible on camera, the defendant prevented medical intervention. Xavier Kelso, Margot's attorney, a man in his mid-40s with the polished aggression of someone who specialized in high-stakes litigation, rose to object. Your Honor, this footage lacks audio context. We have no way of knowing what was said, what my client understood about the severity of the situation. You're overruled, Judge Cardenas said. The timeline speaks for itself. Continue, Mr. Wolf. Ignacio played the sequence 3 times. Each viewing made it clearer. Margot checking her phone, typing, waiting. The incoming text at 3:58. Her immediate shift from blocking to permitting. I note the precision, Ignacio said. The moment she receives this text at 3:58:23 p.m., she steps aside. At 3:58:41, 18 seconds later, she gestures to Ms. Ashford to make the call. This was not confusion. This was coordination. I watched Margot's face. She sat at the defense table, hands folded, expression neutral. No tears. No shock. She'd seen this footage before she'd made sure it existed. Josette used to teach me that in venture capital the same data could tell opposite stories depending on the narrative. Revenue growth meant traction or unsustainable burn rate. Pivot meant agility or desperation. The numbers were the same. The story determined their meaning. Margot had learned that lesson too well. Judge Cardenas called a brief recess. When we reconvened, Xavier Kelso stood. Your Honor, the defense calls Margot Upshaw. She took the stand with perfect composure. Wore a conservative navy dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back. looked younger than 28, vulnerable. Xavier's questions were gentle. Ms. Upshaw, can you describe what you saw when you entered your mother's office that afternoon? Margot's voice broke on the first word. She was on the floor. I'd just come upstairs to ask her about dinner plans, and she was... Tears welled. She was on the floor, and her face was wrong, drooping. I knew something terrible had happened. What did you do? I froze. She wiped her eyes. I know that sounds impossible. I know it looks cold on camera, but I couldn't move, couldn't think. My mother was dying and my brain just stopped. The footage shows you on your phone for 11 minutes. Can you explain that? I was trying to call for help, but I couldn't make my fingers work. I kept opening contacts, staring at numbers, unable to press anything. It felt like moving through water, like time wasn't real. Xavier nodded sympathetically. Ms. Upshaw, have you ever experienced dissociative episodes before? After my father died, yes. Trauma does that. Makes you disconnect from reality when it's too much to process. No, Your Honor, Xavier said, we'd like to call Dr. Simone Avery as an expert witness. The psychologist who took the stand was credentialed and confident. She explained acute stress reactions, dissociative states, how the brain protects itself from overwhelming trauma by creating distance from reality. Could someone experiencing a dissociative episode appear to be texting while actually being unable to complete the action? Xavier asked. Absolutely, Dr. Avery said. The person might perform repetitive motions, opening apps, typing fragments without actually processing what they're doing. To an observer, it looks intentional. To the person experiencing it, it's paralysis disguised as motion. Margot's performance was flawless. Every pause, every trembling breath, perfectly calibrated. The gallery's expressions shifted from horror to sympathy. I felt the courtroom's air conditioning creating a faint hum that matched the frequency of my tinnitus. A sound that only appeared when my blood pressure spiked. My knuckles were white against the bench edge. She was turning the smoking gun into a shield. The evidence proved the delay, but her narrative gave it an innocent explanation. Traumatized daughter frozen by shock, unable to help, despite desperately wanting to. Judge Cardenas took notes, expression unreadable. Xavier finished his questioning. Ignacio stood for cross-examination, but before he could speak, something shifted. Margot leaned toward Xavier and whispered something I couldn't hear from across the courtroom. Whatever she said drained the color from his face. Xavier shot to his feet. Your Honor, I request an immediate recess. Judge Cardenas frowned. On what grounds? We need to discuss a procedural matter that may change the entire direction of this hearing. Counsel, we're in the middle of... Your Honor, this is urgent. New information has come to light that requires immediate consultation. The judge studied him. Whatever she saw in his face made her nod. 15 minutes. Both counsel in my chambers. Now. The name Margot, whispered Sage Irvine, 15 years old, hit me like a second stroke. Judge Cardenas had granted a 3-day adjournment to review Margot's emergency motion. When we reconvened on July 15th, Xavier Kelso looked like he hadn't slept. Ignacio pulled me aside in the courthouse hallway. Margot's planning to subpoena Sage as a witness. She's claiming the girl has material testimony about Josette's relationship with Nigel, about family dynamics, about estate intent. Emmerich went rigid beside me. She's 15. She's Nigel's daughter. Weaponizing a child, Ignacio said flatly. Even if Sage tells the truth, whatever version Margot wants her to tell, the press will destroy her. A teenage girl testifying in her half-sister's inheritance battle is media poison. He paused. Xavier told me off the record he's deeply uncomfortable. But Margot's insisting. I thought about Sage's email, Her quiet plea, "I don't want to be part of this anymore." Her whispered thank you when I'd protected her identity. Now Margot wanted to drag her into open court. When Judge Cardenas called us back into session, she looked at Xavier with an expression suggesting she'd already formed her opinion. "Counsel, Ms. Irvine is a minor. What's the justification for subjecting a 15-year-old to hostile examination?" Xavier stood like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "Your Honor, my client maintains that Ms. Irvine has first-hand knowledge of conversations relevant to estate intent and family dynamics. Ms. Irvine is the daughter of Nigel Irvine, who is himself named as a co-conspirator in the fraud allegations." "Yes, Your Honor, but my client believes contipuan." "Your client believes a 15-year-old should be put on a witness stand in a case involving her father's alleged financial crimes." The judge's tone was ice. Mr. Wolf opposing counsel's response, Ignacio stood. "We strenuously object to involving any minor in this litigation, Your Honor. Motion to add minor witness is tabled pending further review. We reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. That evening, I sat with Emmerich and Ignacio making calls I should have made weeks earlier. Sage's mother lived in Bakersfield with Sage and her younger brother. I'd never spoken to her. When I explained what Margot was trying to do, her voice went cold. That girl has been through enough. Her father uses her as a prop. Now Margot wants to put her on trial. I want to arrange protection," I said. "Legal representation to block the subpoena. Therapy coverage if she needs it. A sealed deposition instead of open court testimony if testimony becomes absolutely unavoidable. Whatever keeps her out of the spotlight." "Why would you do that? You're fighting Nigel. Sage is his daughter. She's also 15 years old, and none of this is her fault." Silence. Then, "What do you need from me?" By midnight, I'd arranged everything: a family law attorney, specializing in minor witness protections, a therapist experienced in litigation trauma, a motion to quash any subpoena on grounds of undue burden to a minor. Emmerich watched me work, speaking around 1 a.m. "You're giving up leverage. Margot will claim you're hiding something." "Well, let her," I said. "I won't let a 15-year-old become collateral damage in a war between adults. Judge Cardenas will see this as good faith. Margot's move looks desperate." "No, it is desperate. She's losing on evidence, losing on narrative. Threatening a child is what people do when they're out of options." The next morning, I held a brief press conference outside the courthouse. No dramatic accusations, no attacks on Margot. Just a simple statement opposing counsel had attempted to subpoena a 15-year-old minor, and I had taken steps to ensure her well-being would be protected above all tactical considerations. The media shifted overnight. Headlines moved from "Daughter fights stepfather over inheritance" to "Man shields teen from courtroom battle." By evening, 3 legal ethics organizations had filed friend-of-court briefs supporting my motion. Xavier Kelso quietly withdrew from Margot's legal team, citing irreconcilable differences in litigation strategy. Margot would need a new attorney. I was reviewing documents at 8 p.m. when Ignacio called. "Judge Cardenas just posted a notification. Emergency hearing tomorrow morning at 9. Motion to dismiss evidentiary sufficiency." "Margot's dismissing her case." "No. She's asking the judge to dismiss yours. Filed it 2 hours ago." He paused. "This is her final move, Aldrich. The argument is that you lack standing to bring any claims at all, because you're not Margot's biological father. You never had legal authority over Josette's estate decisions, therefore any evidence of fraud is irrelevant to your standing as a party." The full architecture of it crystallized in my mind. Everything she'd done, every delay, every tearful performance, every desperate maneuver had been building toward this single argument. She was trying to turn the DNA evidence, the fact that I'd raised her for 28 years under a deliberate lie, into the legal reason I couldn't fight back. Tomorrow morning, we'd find out if Judge Cardenas agreed. The emergency hearing began at 9 a.m. sharp, with Judge Cardenas presiding like she had already lost patience before anyone spoke. The courtroom was packed with reporters who had heard about Margot's latest move, claiming I had no standing because I was not her biological father. Ms. Hartley, the judge, said, looking straight at her. Your motion argues that Mr. Upshaw lacks standing because he is not your biological father. Do you dispute that he is your legal father under California law? Margot stood beside her new attorney Chen, a nervous associate who looked like he had inherited a disaster. Your Honor, the trust instrument refers to biological issue, and we believe answer the question. Judge Cardenas cut in. Is Aldrich Upshaw your legal father? Margot's mouth tightened. Technically, yes, but then he has standing. Motion denied. The courtroom shifted. Margot's face went from shock to rage, then to panic so quickly I almost missed it. The judge leaned forward. You are asking this court to invent a distinction between biological and legal parentage that has no basis in trust law, family law, or common sense. Chen tried to object, but the judge was not finished. Furthermore, I am referring Xavier Kelso to the State Bar for immediate investigation. She lifted a document. Mr. Kelso submitted a declaration in support of this motion that directly contradicts testimony he gave in the Irvine custody matter 3 years ago. Either he committed perjury then, or he committed perjury now. Either way, this court will not tolerate it. Breyer touched my arm under the table. Her face stayed neutral, but I felt the tremor of restrained triumph in her fingers. Chen stammered that Kelso had already withdrawn from the case. Judge Cardenas gave him a cold look. Withdrawal does not erase ethical violations committed while he was counsel of record. Then she granted my request for a restraining order. Margot was prohibited from contacting Sage Irvine or her family directly or indirectly. Any violation would bring contempt charges and possible criminal prosecution. This is absurd, Margot snapped. He stole everything that belongs to me. He twisted my mother's intentions. Ms. Hartley, the judge, said, voice sharp enough to silence the room, I strongly suggest you confer with your attorney before saying another word on the record. Trial remains set for August 5th. This hearing is adjourned. When the judge left, Margot turned toward me. Her hatred looked almost familiar, echoing Josette in the worst moments of our marriage. You think you've won? She said. You have no idea what's coming. Chen grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the exit before she could destroy herself further. Breyer waited until they were gone. That went better than expected, she said quietly. The Kelso referral was a gift. Every attorney in California will think twice before touching her case now. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited behind barricades. Breyer had prepared a safe statement for me about respecting the court and honoring Josette's intentions. But the first question cut straight through it. Mr. Upshaw's sources say you spent over $300,000 protecting a teenager who isn't related to you. Some call it noble. Others question your motives. Why do it? I looked into the cameras and let them see the anger I usually kept buried. Because it was the right thing to do. Sage Irvine is a child who witnessed something traumatic. She deserves protection, not exploitation. Anyone who would drag a 15-year-old into a trust dispute for leverage has lost basic human decency. I won't apologize for doing what's right. Within 2 hours, that quote went viral. By afternoon, 3 more updates hit my phone. The State Bar opened a formal investigation into Xavier Kelso. The court seized Margot's LLC pending the fraud inquiry, and 2 of her expert witnesses withdrew, citing ethical concerns. Grace called while I sat in my study. The media narrative flipped completely, she said. You're being called principled. Margot is being called things I won't repeat. I didn't do this for public opinion. I know. But public opinion shapes jury pools. Then her tone changed. There's more. A source from Margot's former law firm says she's been trying to access Josette's email archive from June 1st through June 3rd, 2024. My hand tightened around the phone. June 1st, 2 days before Josette collapsed. June 3rd. The day Margot waited 12 minutes before letting Kay call 911. What is she looking for? I asked. That's what worries me, Grace said. Why those dates unless there's something we missed? That evening, I went to Josette's atelier. Her unfinished painting still sat on the easel, all blues and grays, darker than her usual work. I stood among her canvases and art books, wondering what else she had hidden inside the life we had shared for 32 years. At 10:47 p.m., my laptop chimed. An encrypted email had arrived from an address I didn't recognize. No subject, no message. Just one attachment, insurance_policy_final.pdf. I checked the file properties, my hand unsteady. The creation date froze my blood, June 1st, 2024, 11:32 p.m., 2 days before Josette died. I stared at the attachment finger hovering over the mouse and knew whatever Josette had created in her final 48 conscious hours was about to change everything. The decryption key arrived at 2:47 a.m., no message, just 16 alphanumeric characters from the same anonymous address. My hands shook as I entered the string. The PDF unlocked with a soft click, revealing a folder structure labeled Josette_estate_correspondence_June 2024. Inside, 43 emails spanning June 1st through 3rd, meticulously organized by sender. The first email made my vision blur. From Gerard Thorne. To Margot Hartley. Subject: Re-LLC registration complete. Gerard Thorne. Our family attorney for 12 years. The man who'd helped Josette draft her will, who'd sat in our living room drinking scotch and discussing estate planning, who'd sent a handwritten condolence card after she died. I forced myself to read. Margot Coastal Properties Holdings, LLC and Pacific Trust Management, LLC, are now registered with me as agent. Your mother's signature on the trust amendment is clean. Once the health event occurs, we proceed with Phase 2 as discussed. Destroy this email, GT. The date stamp read June 1st, 2024, 1917 p.m., 2 days before Josette's stroke. I called Breyer at 3:08 a.m. She answered on the first ring. I need you to look at something, I said. Now. She arrived 40 minutes later, still in sweatpants, her hair pulled back. I handed her my laptop without explanation. I watched her face change as she read shock giving way to cold fury. Gerard Thorne designed the entire structure. He's not just complicit. He's the architect. Keep reading. The emails told the complete story Thorne had created. The Shell LLCs, in April 2024, registered himself as agent and coached Margot through each transfer. He drafted the trust amendment language specifically to create the signature trap, a clause that required dual authorization for distributions over $50,000, but only after Josette's death. He'd known exactly what they were planning. Email 14, dated June 2nd, made it explicit. The neurologist confirms progressive TIAs. Timeline is days, not weeks. Ensure you're present when the major event occurs. Document everything for the contestation strategy. Breyer set down the laptop. He told her when Josette would have the stroke. He helped her position herself to be there. And then she waited 12 minutes to call for help. We spent the next 6 hours compiling evidence. Every email. Every LLC filing bearing Thorne's electronic signature. Every billable hour he'd charged the estate while simultaneously conspiring to loot it. By noon on July 25th, Breyer had drafted a formal state bar complaint. 73 pages. Exhibits A through Q. This will destroy him, she said quietly. Disbarment, criminal charges, civil liability for every dollar Margot took. Good. How many times had Gerard Thorne sat across from Josette and me offering counsel with a traitor's smile? How many confidential conversations had he weaponized for Margot's benefit? 12 years of trust incinerated in 43 emails. The state bar moved faster than I'd expected. Kay Ashford called on July 26th, requesting an in-person interview at their San Francisco offices. She was younger than I'd anticipated, mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the controlled demeanor of someone who'd seen every variety of attorney misconduct. She sat across from me in a conference room overlooking Market Street, a digital recorder between us. Mr. Upshaw. She began, her voice precise. Gerard Thorne represented both you and your late wife. Under California law, he owed fiduciary duties to both of you and to your wife's estate after her death. He violated all of them, and that's what we're here to determine. She pulled up the emails on her tablet. Walk me through what you found. I took her through it chronologically. The LLC formations, the registered agent filings, the June emails proving Thorne knew about the scheme before Josette died, the evidence that he'd helped Margot position herself to be present during the stroke. Kay's expression never changed, but I saw her jaw tighten when I reached the June 2nd email about the neurologist's timeline. Now, he helped your stepdaughter steal from the trust while your wife was still alive, she said, her voice flat, while he was still actively representing the estate. Yes. That's conspiracy to commit fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, violation of attorney-client privilege. She made notes on her tablet. We'll have his license suspended by end of week. Formal disbarment proceedings to follow. Breyer leaned forward. What about criminal referral? Already drafted. The district attorney's office will have our evidence package by tomorrow morning. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph. Just the mechanical advancement of justice grinding forward whether I wanted it or not. By July 27th, the legal machinery had completed its work. Judge Cardenas issued comprehensive restraining orders protecting every witness from contact by Margot Thorne or their associates. Nigel Irvine and his daughter Sage were specifically named. The orders also froze Thorne's access to any account connected to the LLC's illegal wall around the evidence. Breyer called with the final update. The restraining orders are comprehensive. No contact with any witness, direct or indirect. Any violation triggers immediate contempt charges and possible criminal prosecution. Nigel Irvine and Sage are safe. Completely. Margot's network is legally dismantled. She paused. All that's left is the trial itself. I sat in Josette's atelier that evening, surrounded by her paintings. The weight of the past 8 weeks pressed down like physical force. Gerard Thorne's betrayal somehow cut deeper than Margot's. She was damaged, grasping, predictable. But Thorne had been a friend. Or I'd thought he was. I realized the state bar complaint bore my signature, the first legal document in 40 years where I was both plaintiff and witness. Not a professor analyzing historical injustice, but the injured party demanding accountability. My phone vibrated at 8:34 p.m. Unknown number. Same one that had sent the encryption key. 2 words, one left. No explanation, no context, no clarification. I stared at the message, my pulse accelerating. One left. One more conspirator. One more piece of evidence. One more betrayal waiting to surface. Whoever was feeding me this information, someone inside Margot's conspiracy, Someone with access to encrypted files and protected communications. They weren't finished. And neither was I. When Margot texted asking to meet just us, no lawyers, I should have known. But the part of me that remembered teaching her to ride a bike, walking her down the aisle, still wanted to believe she was capable of remorse. She arrived July 30th in jeans and a gray sweater, no makeup, looking deliberately young, vulnerable, calculated. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, voice breaking. "I know I don't deserve it." I let her in. Emmerich positioned himself in the study with the door cracked close enough if needed. Margot sat on the couch, where Josette used to read, hands clasped in her lap. Mom trained me for this from childhood. She taught me to see family as strategy, love as weakness unless it served a purpose. I kept my voice level. "Josette died 2 months ago. You've had time to choose differently. You think I could just turn off 30 years of conditioning?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Every family dinner was a masterclass in emotional leverage. I didn't steal from you because I wanted to. It's the only way I know how to survive." For a moment, I almost believed her. Then Emmerich emerged from the study, laptop in hand. The LLC formations started in April 2023. He said quietly, setting the computer on the coffee table. 14 months before Mom's stroke. You didn't follow her plan, you built your own. Margot's expression flickered before the tears resumed. The TIAs had started early. I knew she'd want me to secure the assets before. Stop. I stood, hands shaking. Josette's first documented TIA was May 2024. You started this a year earlier when she was still healthy. Her face cycled through shock rage and something I recognized now as pure calculation. She stood slowly. "You'll regret this," she said, the tears entirely gone. All of it. She left without another word. Emmerich locked the door behind her. "Dad, are you okay?" "I don't know." On August 1st, searching Margot's old bedroom for documents Breyer needed for the trial, I found a sealed envelope wedged behind a box of high school yearbooks. Postmarked September 2018. Addressed to Margot in Josette's distinctive slanted script. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. 6 pages of handwritten text on monogrammed stationery. It began, "My dearest daughter, by the time you read this, you'll be old enough to understand the real rules." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't guidance, it was a manual. Rule 3. Tears are currency. Spend them strategically, never wastefully. Practice in mirrors until the timing feels natural. Rule 7. Family loyalty is narrative, not obligation. Blood is only as thick as its utility. Rule 12. Document everything, trust no one, and always maintain plausible deniability. If you must confess to manipulation, frame it as someone else's training, ideally someone dead. Emmerich found me an hour later, still holding the letter. His face went pale at Rule 12. "She was still my mother," he said finally. "Whatever else she was, she loved us in her way. Did she, or did we just serve a purpose she found useful? We'll never know for certain." He took the letter from my hands. "But we can choose not to become her. That's all that matters now." Reading Josette's handwriting after 2 months felt like watching someone I loved step out of fog, only to realize she'd been wearing a mask the entire time. Every cherished memory now carried double meaning. Her vulnerability when we first met, her devotion to family, her final whispered words in the hospital as the machines counted down. I prepared Margot for everything. I had thought she meant life skills, resilience, strength for hard times. She had meant this. On August 2nd, I built a fire in the fireplace, unnecessary in the California heat, but necessary for my sanity. I fed the letter to the flames page by page, watching Josette's handwriting curl and blacken. Rule 3, Rule 7, Rule 12, all of it reduced to ash. My phone buzzed as the last page caught fire. Unknown number, an image attachment. The photo showed Margot and Gerard Thorne at an outdoor cafe leaning close across a small table, faces intense with conversation. The metadata timestamp read July 30th, 2024, 3:47 p.m., 2 hours after her tearful confession in my living room. Despite the restraining orders, despite Thorne's suspended license, despite everything, I stared at the photo, the final rule still burning to nothing in the grate, and understood with cold clarity that Margot's last play was already in motion, and that this time I would be ready. I forwarded the photo to Breyer at 6:22 a.m. before I could convince myself to protect her one more time. She called back within minutes. This is a clear violation. Meeting with a co-conspirator whose contact is explicitly prohibited by court order. I know. Chris, I'll forward this to the DA immediately. They'll file for bail revocation by end of day. She paused. Are you certain you want to do this? I looked at the photo again. Margot leaning across the cafe table toward Gerard Thorne, her expression intent, calculating. 2 hours after crying in my living room about being Josette's victim, I'm certain. By noon on August 3rd, Margot was in custody. Bail revoked, trial date confirmed for September. Breyer called with the update, her voice professionally neutral. Maati, the DA will keep her detained until trial. The restraining order violation combined with the fraud charges and witness tampering allegations made her a flight risk. 29 years old and she's choosing this. I stared out the window at Josette's rose garden overgrown now with weeds. I raised her better than this. No. Breyer's voice was gentle but firm. Josette raised her. You loved her. There's a difference. The words landed like a diagnosis I'd been avoiding. Emmerich found me the next evening in the study, surrounded by old photo albums. I'd pulled them down from the high shelf where they'd sat untouched since Josette's death, looking for something I couldn't name. The press is calling you vindictive, he said quietly, sitting in the chair across from my desk. Half of Silicon Valley thinks you're punishing Margot for not being your biological daughter. The Chronicle ran an op-ed this morning titled, When Family Values Become Vengeance. I turned a page. There was Margot at 5 riding on my shoulders at her kindergarten graduation, her arms spread wide like airplane wings. Her smile was genuine then, or was it already performance? Had Josette already started the lessons by that age? Let them think what they want, I said. I know what happened in that house on June 3rd. Emmerich leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Was it worth it, Dad, losing everything to prove you were right? I closed the album. What have I lost? Margot. Your reputation. Mom's memory, every obituary, every tribute, it's all been reframed as the tragic backstory to a family scandal. Your friends are choosing sides. The university is reviewing your emeritus status. He gestured at the albums. 22 years of fatherhood recontextualized as either manipulation or delusion, depending on who's telling the story. And if I'd stayed silent, you'd have kept your comfortable life, your respectable grief, your untainted memories. He met my eyes. You'd have $50 million less, but you'd still have a daughter. I stood, walked to the window. The garden looked wild, beautiful in its disorder. Josette would have hated it. I keep thinking about the alternatives, I said. I could have accepted the loss, told everyone Josette changed her mind about the trust distribution before she died, that she wanted Margot to have the money. No one would have questioned it. Grief makes people generous with other people's legacies. Why didn't you? Because Josette collapsed on that floor at 3:47 p.m., and someone who claimed to love her looked at the clock and waited 12 minutes before calling for help. I turned to face him. 12 minutes. Long enough for the window of intervention to close. Long enough to ensure maximum damage. And the entire time she was calculating how to turn a tragedy into a payday. The room felt too small, Suddenly the walls pressing in with the weight of everything I'd learned. That truth matters more than my comfort, I continued. More than my reputation. More than preserving a daughter who was never really mine to begin with. She was yours, Emmerich said softly. For a while at least. Before Josette's programming took over completely, I thought about Josette's letter, the rules burned to ash in the fireplace. Rule 12. If you must confess to manipulation, frame it as someone else's training. Margot had followed the script perfectly, right down to blaming her dead mother. The anonymous informant knew, I said. Whoever's been sending me evidence, they knew I'd need to see all of it. Not just Margot's fraud, not just Gerard Thorne's conspiracy, but Josette's foundation underneath it all. What do you mean? They forced me to see the truth about everyone. Margot, Thorne, Josette. I paused. Myself. Truth is like surgery. The cutting hurts, but leaving the corruption inside kills you slowly. I'd spent 2 months in the operating room excising 30 years of carefully maintained illusions. And now, Emmerich asked. See, now I wait for September. I testify. I tell the truth under oath, and whatever happens after that is out of my hands. You're at peace with it. Peace is too strong a word, but I can look at myself in the mirror. I glanced at the photo albums. That's more than Josette could say. More than Margot can say. It'll have to be enough. We sat in silence for a moment, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny ghosts. The doorbell rang sharp, unexpected. Emmerich went to answer it. I heard voices at the door, then his footsteps returning. Crédit, he said, handing me a legal-sized envelope, marked urgent. The return address read, Superior Court of California, Los Angeles County. I tore it open, expecting a scheduling update or procedural notice. Inside, a single-page document on official court letterhead. Notice of plea agreement. I read the first line twice, unable to process the words. Defendant Margot Hartley has accepted a negotiated plea agreement with the District Attorney's Office. All criminal proceedings are resolved. Civil trial scheduled for September 2024 is hereby canceled. The trial I'd prepared for the testimony, I'd rehearsed the confrontation, I'd braced myself for none of it would happen. Margot had surrendered. The plea agreement gave Margot everything she claimed to want: no trial, no public testimony, no cameras, just consequences. Breyer walked me through the terms over speakerphone, while Emmerich sat across from me in the study. Full restitution to the estate. 5 years probation. 2,000 hours of community service with organizations serving families affected by elder abuse. Permanent restraining order prohibiting contact with me, Emmerich, or any member of the Irvine family. She'll never touch a dollar of it, Breyer said. The restitution is complete and irrevocable. The funds transfer back to the trust within 30 days. And the criminal charges resolved. She pled guilty to felony fraud and conspiracy. It's on her record permanently. Breyer paused. She got the privacy she wanted, but she lost everything she fought for. I thanked her and ended the call. Emmerich was watching me carefully. What are you thinking? He asked. That I need to do something useful with it. By October, the paperwork was complete. The Upshaw Technology Scholarship Foundation, established with the recovered funds and structured as an irrevocable charitable trust. Mission providing coding education and college scholarships to underprivileged youth in Oregon, the state where Josette had grown up before ambition and calculation had consumed whatever goodness she'd started with. Emmerich hesitated when I asked him to serve as co-trustee. You're sure you want my name on this? He asked. After everything with Mom and Margot, especially after everything. I signed the foundation documents and slid them across the table. You're proof that this family still knows how to choose right over easy. That matters. He signed, We opened the Foundation's community center in Bend in December, a modest building with 10 computer workstations, a small library, and a conference room for mentorship sessions. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed Silicon Valley wealth. Just a quiet space where kids who'd been dealt bad hands could learn skills that might change their trajectories. The first scholarship event happened in mid-January. 23 applicants ages 14 to 18, each one carrying stories that made my chest ache. Foster care, homelessness, parents in prison, kids who'd seen too much too young and were still choosing to build rather than destroy. I was reviewing applications in the conference room when someone knocked softly on the doorframe. Sage Irvin stood there taller than I remembered, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. 16, now living with her aunt in Portland after her father had relocated for work. She held a folder against her chest like a shield. "Mr. Upshaw, I wasn't sure if I should come." I stood. "I'm glad you did." She stepped inside, her eyes darting around the room as if checking for threats. Old habits from someone who'd learned young that adults couldn't always be trusted. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry," she said in a rush. "I'm sorry I made things harder. I didn't know what to do when they asked about you and what happened. I was just trying to tell the truth, but then they said I'd have to testify and—" "Sage," I kept my voice gentle. "You were 15 years old and terrified. You have nothing to apologize for." Her eyes filled. "But they used me. To hurt you. They tried to use you. You refused to be used. That took courage most adults don't have." I gestured to the folder. "Is that what I think it is?" She nodded, handed it over. "The scholarship application. I know you probably don't want to help me after everything, but my counselor said I should apply anyway, so..." I opened the folder. Her name was printed carefully at the top, Sage Minerva Irvine. Below it, an essay about wanting to study cybersecurity to help protect vulnerable people from digital exploitation. When Sage handed me that application, with her name carefully printed at the top, I saw what victory actually looked like. Not a courtroom, but a future. "I hope you do," I said. "Apply, I mean. We need people like you in this field." She smiled, tentative, genuine, and left with the kind of lightness that comes from setting down weight you were never meant to carry. I returned to Los Altos Hills that evening, the house quiet and still. The atelier remained untouched, Josette's unfinished canvases gathering dust. Her roses had gone completely wild in the garden, blooming in defiant chaos. I made tea. Earl Grey, the same blend I'd been drinking since my teaching days, and sat in the leather chair by the window. The same chair where I'd sat in June holding Josette's death certificate and trying to understand how my marriage had ended in a hospital room, with machines counting down the seconds. 7 months ago. A lifetime ago. I thought about what I'd lost, Josette's memory unsalvageable, now that I knew what she'd really been. Margot's relationship, if it had ever been real to begin with. My reputation in certain circles where I'd be forever known as the professor who'd destroyed his stepdaughter over money. The comfortable illusions I'd maintained for 3 decades, and what remained truth, hard-edged and unforgiving. Integrity battered but intact. Emmerich's loyalty proof that love could survive even the worst revelations. The capacity for grace demonstrated in a conference room with a 16-year-old girl who'd been weaponized by people who should have protected her. The house in Los Altos Hills held 42 years of memories, some beautiful, some poisoned, all true. I didn't have to burn it down to move forward. I just had to see it clearly. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. One final message. "You kept your integrity. That's rarer than you think." XK. Xavier Kelso. The attorney who'd enabled Margot until his conscience caught up. The anonymous informant who'd sent me everything I needed to see the full picture, Gerard Thorne's emails, Josette's letter, the photograph of Margot's betrayal. He'd been seeking penance, sending evidence like prayers to a god he'd stopped believing in. I deleted the message without responding. Some debts don't need acknowledgement. Some mysteries don't need solving. I set down my tea and looked out at the garden, wild and beautiful, in the fading light. I couldn't save the marriage. Couldn't save Margot from Josette's programming or her own choices. Couldn't undo the 12 minutes that had cost Josette her life and Margot her future. But I'd saved my humanity, the part of me that still believed truth mattered more than comfort, that integrity was worth the cost, that grace could be offered, even to those who'd tried to destroy me. They'd wanted to take that away. Josette with her manipulation playbook, Margot with her calculated cruelty, Gerard Thorne with his betrayal of everything his profession claimed to stand for. They'd failed. I picked up my tea still warm and took a sip. The taste was familiar, grounding. Ordinary. That was enough. And to you listening to my story, remember this: the truth will cost you something, but lies will cost you everything. Looking back, I could have avoided all of this pain. I could have accepted the loss, preserved the comfortable lies, and lived the rest of my life never knowing who I'd really married or raised. Part of me wishes I'd made that choice. But I know now that living with a lie would have slowly destroyed the only thing I had left: my integrity. If you're facing something similar in your own family story, I want you to know this: choosing truth over comfort is the hardest thing you'll ever do. It will isolate you and make people question your motives, but it's also the only choice that lets you sleep at night. I believe God gives us these impossible moments not to break us, but to show us what we're made of. When you stand on the other side, you'll know you did the right thing, even if it cost you everything. If this grandpa story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me, have you ever had to choose truth over comfort? What happened? And if you enjoy these grandpa stories and family stories like this one, please subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time and attention mean more than you know. One final reminder: while this story contains fictionalized elements for clarity and impact, the lesson it carries is real. May you find the courage to choose truth when your moment comes.